Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and this is the big one. We are going to be doing my entire movie collection. I did one of these videos last year, but I wasn't happy with it. It was very early in the channel. It wasn't very produced very nicely. So I decided, you know what, I've gotten a lot more movies over the last year since we've started the channel. And I thought, you know what, it's time. We got to dive back into my collection, see what we got, get rid of some of the movies I don't want to have anymore, get rid of the doubles. I've already taken a bunch of doubles off the shelf, and I have a pile over here to my right. We'll talk about what I'll be doing with those doubles at the very end of this video, so make sure you stick around. But we're going to dive right into it because there is a lot here, and I like to start it off with the drama section. And I start my drama section off on my shelf, which is this shelf right here. I like to start that off with the Criterion collection because that's what they lean into most. Have they released other stuff? Of course, there's some horror in there, there's some comedies in there, but for the most part, they stick to some independently released dramas, very important films. And who makes very important films nowadays? Well, Wes Anderson, and pretty much all of his movies up till Isle of Dogs have been released through the Criterion collection. Some of these I had doubles for, we'll talk about them later. But you got Rushmore from 1998, one of my personal favorite movies ever. The Royal Tenenbaums from 2001. The Life Aquatic of Steve Zissou. All of these featuring great Bill Murray performances, by the way. The fantastic Mr. Fox. Moonrise Kingdom, which is one of my personal favorite from Wes Anderson. And The Grand Budapest Hotel. Next up, we got the Before trilogy from Richard Linklater. These three films, they're all individually packed in this beautiful box, this beautiful exterior box. I absolutely love this one. Then we got my first Criterion Blu-ray. My wife bought this for me as a gift. 1992's The Player. Dazed and Confused. This is only a Blu-ray, actually. There is a 4K out there, but Matt gave this to me as a gift. Another Richard Linklater film. Thief. If you guys know Michael Mann, this was, I believe, his first feature film. He had released some TV movies starring James Caan. I love Thief. That's a great one. The Thin Blue Line, one of my favorite documentaries of all time, with a great Philip Glass score. How often can you rewatch a documentary? But I can always rewatch this one because it's highly entertaining and the score is great. Marriage Story. This is one of those combinations of Netflix and Criterion. This was originally released, and you can still watch it on a 4K stream on Netflix. But this is a great transfer, great film starring Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson, directed by Noah Baumbach. Citizen Kane. Now, I do not like the packaging for this, mainly because it just explodes out when you get it, but it is such a great collection, and if you're a fan of the Criterion collection of Citizen Kane, this is a must-own. Malcolm X. This is one of my favorite films ever. I still think that this is the greatest biographical film ever released, starring Denzel Washington, who should have won an Academy Award, but it came out the same year as Scent of a Woman, and they had to make up for not giving Al Pacino an Academy Award for The Godfather or The Godfather Part 2. So they gave it to him for Scent of a Woman, which he didn't deserve it for, but Denzel did deserve it for Malcolm X, and we would make up for that with Trading Day. The Academy has a horrible habit of making things up for people. Robert Towns' Hollywood Shuffle. This was also written with him and Keenen Ivory Wayans. I love that movie. I've watched it a few times since I even got that. Beauty and the Beast. This is the 1946 one, originally called La Belle et la Bête because it is in French. Not the best one. I still think 1991's is the best Beauty and the Beast, but that one is great as well. David Fincher's The Game from 1997. This was a follow-up to Seven, starring Sean Penn and Michael Douglas. That one is a great movie as well. My Own Private Idaho. Gus Van Zant's directed, starring Keanu Reeves and River Phoenix. This is a great film. Keanu Reeves is okay in it, but River Phoenix does a phenomenal job. It just makes you so upset that we lost him at such a young age. In the Mood for Love. Now, this is a great 4K, but the film itself, Wong Kar-wai's masterpiece. This movie came out, I believe, in either 2000 or 2001, depending where you live. It's still one of the best romance films ever, and it's one of the most beautifully shot films. That 4K doesn't even have HDR on it, but it still looks amazing. Thelma and Louise. This is my favorite 4K of 2023. Criterion held nothing back for this. I actually watched this movie 2 out of 4 days on this because I was just so blown away with it. I forgot how good this Ridley Scott classic is. I think it's his third best film, actually. And then a film that every film fan should see at least once, especially if you're a fan of action films. Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai from the 1950s. This movie, you know what? It hasn't aged gracefully, but it's still okay. It's still one of those films that influenced so many other filmmakers in the future, and it's a fantastic film, and it's also basically what led to The Magnificent Seven. The Magnificent Seven is almost a complete remake of Seven Samurai. So if you're a fan of The Magnificent Seven, you owe yourself that to see Seven Samurai at least once. And then you also get from the early 1980s The Big Chill by Lawrence Kasdan, I believe. Lawrence Kasdan wrote so many great films like Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Silverado he also directed, so this is one of the best writers, and I think this is easily his best film. Now, The Red Shoes. This movies like Perfect Blue, Black Swan owe everything to this movie. This movie walks so those movies can run, but the cinematography of this film has almost no competition. It's one of the most beautiful films ever made, and what they did with this film all the way back then to look this good now, I can understand why Criterion brought this to 4K, because it kind of stands out in their 4K releases, and it really is one that you're going to want to see on an OLED, on the best TV you can possibly find. After Hours, Martin Scorsese classic. This movie is finally getting the love it deserves. It's really nice that it's coming to the 4K Criterion collection, because this is one that kind of gets lost in his filmography and for a long time was kind of considered a failure. Doesn't deserve that. It's a great film. Jean-Luc Godard, speaking of films that will just never be forgotten, this is probably the king of the French New Wave movement when it comes to movies. This is The 400 Blows. I'm not a big French New Wave guy, but there are certain films as a cinephile, as a film fan, you have to see, and this is one of them, and this new 4K is great, and it's actually a big upgrade over the previous Blu-ray that Criterion released, but not big upgrades over previous Blu-rays is the Three Colors trilogy. I have the 4K collection here, but it does come with their previous Blu-rays in here. They're all individually wrapped because it's three colors, white, red, and blue. You watch them, if you want to watch them in order, it goes blue, white, red, and they're all interconnected in a certain way that really builds up in the third film. These all came out in 1994 and 1995. These are some of my favorite films ever. The Blu-rays are much better than the 4Ks. The 4Ks might look clearer, but they are not as the films used to look. If you were used to them a certain way like I was, those 4Ks are very, very disappointing. I've heard things from other people telling me that that's how the film was originally supposed to look. The director has since passed away, so we'll never know for sure, but whichever way you choose to go, it's still good to have these, even if you just choose to watch the Blu-rays like I'll be doing, except for maybe Three Colors Red. Then we got another great 4K here. This is a combination of Criterion and Disney working together, and we get WALL-E. This is definitely something that I absolutely love. Great 4K transfer, and it is an upgrade over the Disney-released 4K of that. 1992's Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me, which is basically a prequel and a sequel to the original TV show, and it also falls in the timeline before the remake series that came out, or the reboot series that came out on, I want to say, Showtime. And then these two films I go back and forth with. What is my favorite David Fincher film? Is it Mulholland Drive or is it Lost Highway? Lost Highway, I have the 4K. There is a 4K for Mulholland Drive. I don't own it yet. I would love to pick it up and do a comparison video to know which one is better, but I go back and forth. Which one do I like more? They're very, very, very similar films. I still think Mulholland Drive might be best now, but I don't know. You ask me on a different day, it could be Lost Highway. I just truly love them both. Repo Man. I love Repo Man, starring Emilio Estevez. This is a great 1980s punk movement kind of film. One you should check out, especially if you're a fan of punk rock. And we get the Noah Baumbach, Greta Gerwig starring. Yes, Greta Gerwig is also an actress. If you only know her as the director of Barbie, she has directed 2 other films. She was also an actress, and she starred in her husband's film, Noah Baumbach's Frances Ha, which is a great movie also. Then we get Menace to Society. This movie is great and also has one of my favorite box designs ever. I love how these two, they cross into the two in Menace to Society. Absolutely love that. Great 4K, by the way. One of the most underappreciated, underrated films ever, starring the most underappreciated, underrated actor, Lawrence Fishburne. This one is directed by Bill Duke, and it is called Deep Cover. This film also features a great over-the-top Jeff Goldblum performance. Over the top is what Jeff Goldblum does best. Then we got Shaft, one of the biggest and probably the most famous blaxploitation film from the 1970s. This movie is a stone cold classic. I absolutely love Shaft. Great 4K. The Fisher King. This has a 4K release. This is the Blu-ray version starring Robin Williams and Jeff Bridges. I love this movie. Good Terry Gilliam movie. If you know Terry Gilliam movies, they can be a little bit weird. That one is no different. If you've ever seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Speaking of movies that have had Blu-ray releases and then got 4K upgrades from the Criterion Collection, I had the previous Blowout Blu-ray, upgraded the 4K, and it is definitely a significant upgrade. I still think that this is Brian De Palma's best film. Stars John Travolta and Nancy Allen. I absolutely love this movie. But movies that are in my top 10 all time, you got Paris, Texas. I absolutely adore this movie. One day I want to do an entire video on this. I'm just wondering if it'll ever come to 4K and if I should wait. But this movie means so much to me. It's in my top 10 all time. I just love Paris, Texas. The Piano, one of the first movies I ever reviewed here on the channel. I wanted to review the 4K for this. It's a great, great movie. Another movie that I reviewed very early in the days of the channel was Miller's Crossing, coming to the Criterion Collection. This is another fantastic film. When it comes to the Coen brothers, this is probably one of their most underrated films. It's a great movie. I get enjoyment out of it every time I watch it. Dealing with the Irish mob. Who doesn't love a good mob movie? Speaking of baseball movies, you get Bull Durham. Bull Durham is another 1980s baseball movie. Fits in perfectly with the Criterion Collection because it doesn't feel like your stereotypical baseball film. It does have some of the tropes, but really it's marching to the beat of its own drum. Kevin Costner is the king of baseball movies. He's great in that. Night of the Living Dead, the one that started it all for zombie films, and for George A. Romero. Great 4K here. Now we're going to talk a little bit of Tarkovsky. You get Solaris, which has a 2001 Steven Soderbergh remake, and then you get Stalker. Both great 1970s sci-fi films. If you're not a fan of slow burns, well, these are some of the slowest burns you'll ever see, so you might not like these movies, but again, if you're a cinephile, a big fan of sci-fi, you're going to want to check those out because they're going to leave you thinking after you see them. And then you got Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters. Paul Schrader's magnum opus, his masterpiece in my opinion. Now, it's not my favorite Paul Schrader film, but what he was able to accomplish with this movie, telling a true story, intertwining dream sequence with real live action, you know, multiple timelines, something that Nolan must have been influenced by, but I love that movie. Also, fantastic packaging. The Virgin Suicides on 4K. This is a great, great film. Sofia Coppola, her first film, knocked it out of the park right out of the gate. One of her best films, and she does a great job directing that because she is not a great actress if you've seen The Godfather Part 3. And speaking of Martin Scorsese, we are going to get Raging Bull on 4K. I had the previous Blu-ray version that's in my seconds pile here, but the 4K is fantastic. This one's just a tough rewatch because it's just so brutal and just downright sad. Barry Lyndon. Now, this one is from Stanley Kubrick, one of the masters of filmmaking. And this one is really notable for the cinematography, using natural lighting to light this film. It's not the most entertaining film in his filmography, but it's definitely one that you're going to appreciate. Devil in the Blue Dress, starring Denzel Washington, but Don Shields steals this movie out from under him. This is a great noir film from the 90s. I absolutely love this movie. LA has never looked better. Is it LA? It might not even be LA. This movie is just gorgeous to look at. It's a great, great, great 4K. And then rounding out my Criterion releases, we got Broadcast News from 1987. This one is also great, starring Albert Brooks, Holly Hunter, and William Hurt. Great movie. Also, Jack Nicholson pops up in there, and I'm also a big James L. Brooks fan, and he directed that. He does a great job. The Worst Person in the World. This movie popped on my radar because of Criterion Collection, and man, I was missing out with this one. When I had just turned 30 and this movie came out on Blu-ray, it really hit me. I have a review for this on the channel if you want to hear my full thoughts on it. Silence of the Lambs. Now, this also has a 4K release. I have the Criterion Blu-ray release, and I had a previous Blu-ray release before this. One of my favorite movies ever, actually. I still think that is the definitive Hannibal Lecter film, and obviously it won some Academy Awards for some big-name actors in there. Defending Your Life, starring Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep. This one's a classic philosophical tale, but very lighthearted, and again, directed by Albert Brooks, because the guy is that talented. Weird movie here by David Cronenberg called Crash. If you ever had a fetish for getting in car accidents, this is the movie for you, and it's definitely very weird if you're a TMNT fan to see Casey Jones popping up in there. 12 Angry Men. This has a Kino Lorber 4K Blu-ray release, but I have the previous release on Criterion. I would like to upgrade one day to do a comparison video, and speaking of comparisons, Arrow Video released Naked Lunch on 4K over in the UK, I believe, or Region B. And over here we have Criterion's Blu-ray release, which means more than likely down the line we'll get a 4K release of that. That's another David Cronenberg film. Now, just diving right into the drama section, we're going to have Adaptation. This is one from a Charlie Kaufman script, stars Nicolas Cage. Great movie. Good 4K, by the way. American History X. This is also a great film. Probably Edward Furlong's best performance, but Edward Norton steals the show in that one. The Assassination of Jesse James by the Coward Robert Ford, starring Brad Pitt and Casey Affleck. They both give career performance in here, but they all get outshined by the cinematography done by Roger Deakins, which might be his best shot film. Didn't win him an Academy Award, though. He would have to wait, I believe, till Blade Runner 2049 for that. Then he'd win again for 1917. All the President's Men, probably Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford's most famous performances. If you ever want to know how Watergate came to be, how Nixon ended up getting fired from the presidency, or, you know, impeached and then resigning in disgrace, this is all you need to know. Watch this movie. Or just watch a documentary, but that movie is thrilling as hell. Apollo 13, Ron Howard, maybe his best film overall. I think it's my favorite film from him. This came right in the middle of Tom Hanks' insane run from like 92 to 02. Almost Famous. This might be Cameron Crowe's best film, actually. I just rewatched this. I love this film. I just go back and forth if it's either this or Jerry Maguire. The best film of 2022, we got Babylon. Damien Chazelle's masterpiece. I think this will go down as his magnum opus. He just threw everything at the wall, almost like he's never going to make a movie again, because this movie has it all in it. If you were worried that Margot Robbie or Brad Pitt couldn't act, watch this movie. If you're a fan of movies like Boogie Nights or Goodfellas, then this movie's right up your alley. I'm a huge fan of those types of movies, so that movie is for me. And I really think if you're a fan of those movies, if you like those sweeping epics during a certain period in time, and you love classic film, you love Singing in the Rain, then that movie is for you. Basketball Diaries from 1995, I want to say. This is one where I think Leonardo DiCaprio gave one of his career best performances before we got to like the 2010s, where he's just been firing on all cylinders. But this is really where we knew that this guy could act. Also, Mark Wahlberg's first film. Big Fish. This is probably Tim Burton's last great film, in my opinion. This movie really is going to pull at your heartstrings. It's a great father-son story. I mean, it has all of the fixings for a great Tim Burton film, but it really just showed that he can do really captivating drama, and he doesn't need all of the gothic stuff in there to tell that story, because this movie is perfect. Boiler Room. This one is actually pretty funny because it takes place on Long Island, and it really happened. It's based on a true story, and I actually had a teacher in high school who worked for this company who got out before they got raided. So, very interesting movie, also very entertaining. If you're a fan of Wall Street, they take a lot from that. Boiler Room took a lot from Wall Street, not the vice versa. Boys in the Hood. Now, this is a great 4K Blu-ray. Definitely one of the best films of the 1990s. John Singleton's masterpiece, knocked it out of the park in his first film, showed that Ice Cube didn't act, put Cuba Gooding Jr. on the map. Just a great movie. A movie that's kind of gotten lost to time, Johnny Depp's Blow. This movie is great. It's basically just the story of a glorified middleman. David Lean's Bridge on the River Kwai. I believe this is the movie he did before Lawrence of Arabia. This movie is another one of his sweeping epics. Very long film, very good film, starring Alec Guinness. I love this movie. Good 4K. Movie that's come out over the last 10 years that deserves more love. I also love that they have the red Blu-ray case for this. Is Birdman. We all thought Michael Keaton was going to win the Best Actor for this. Unfortunately, he didn't. But the movie did win Best Picture, and it deserved it that year, in my opinion. Another Best Picture winner, we got Braveheart. This is one of the best films of the 1990s. I feel like Mel Gibson's personal life has kind of cast a shadow on this film, and people have forgotten, you know what, this was a really good movie. Coal Miner's Daughter. This is another fantastic film. I actually just got this Blu-ray last year. I think it was like $5. I'm really glad to have that one. We got Backdraft, where the enemy of the movie is fire. What if fire had a mind? Well, that's what this movie is exploring, and you get great performances in there by Kurt Russell, William Baldwin, who never really gets to shine. And you also get Robert De Niro popping up for a small role like he was doing in the early 1990s in movies like this and A Bronx Tale. Then we got a couple WB classics here in Casablanca on 4K, one of the best studio-released black and white 4Ks. And then you also get Cool Hand Luke on 4K. This is a great 4K. I love the steelbook on this. This is actually one of WB's best releases of 2023. You get Chinatown, one of my personal top 10 all-time. If you're doing the math, I don't know how over I've got on my top 10 all-time. I haven't done a list in a long time, but Chinatown would definitely get a spot on there. One of the most beautifully shot movies ever. Really, Jack Nicholson, Faye Dunaway do a great job. I just love that movie. Castaway really just shows that Tom Hanks is a great actor. He is acting against the volleyball, and we all bought into it. Dallas Buyers Club won Matthew McConaughey and Jared Leto Academy Awards. Is it a great film? I've only seen it once on this Blu-ray, and I thought it was really good, but I haven't felt compelled to run back to it. Downfall. This was actually recommended to me by Shamrock Balls or David, whatever you guys want to call it. Great movie. If you ever want it, probably one of the best World War II movies out there. It's more of a drama than it is an action movie, and I really appreciate this one. Drive, starring Ryan Gosling. This movie took the world by storm when it first came out. 1989's Do the Right Thing. This has a Criterion release. I have the 4K Blu-ray version from Universal. This film is fantastic. If Spike Lee didn't make Malcolm X, this would be his best film because it's just that good. Should have won Best Picture in 1989. Instead, we had to give it to Driving Miss Daisy, but that movie is absolutely perfect. Edge of 17. This was recommended to me, and I didn't expect to love this movie as much as I did, but it really is that good. Trust me on that. Tom Cruise in The Firm. We did a review for this 4K earlier in the year. I think it's actually a pretty damn good 4K. A Few Good Men, directed by Rob Reiner, starring Kevin Pollak, Tom Cruise, Demi Moore, Kiefer Sutherland, Kevin Bacon. This movie features a stacked cast, and Jack Nicholson swoops in at the very end to steal the entire movie from all of them. Sylvester Stallone's First Blood. This is the only Rambo movie you're going to see in my entire collection because I believe that this is his best film. Probably Stallone's best film that he's ever made, actually. Everything Everywhere All at Once. This was one of the best movies to come out last year. I love this movie on 4K. Father of the Bride Part 1 and Part 2. This is my New Year's tradition, is to watch these two movies. I absolutely love both of them. The first one is better, but I still like them both. Flight, Denzel Washington's underrated film. Also probably Robert Zemeckis' last great film. Great special effects in this, and also just tells a great, compelling story with Denzel Washington struggling with drugs and alcohol and just what that means to his life, dealing with his relationship with Kelly Riley. Absolutely love that movie. Fatal Attraction on 4K. I actually remember reading a lot of bad reviews for this 4K, and I'm going to disagree with them. This is a great 4K. I don't know if they remember what the previous versions of this film looked like, but I thought that that was an upgrade. The Fugitive. This movie needs a 4K. This Blu-ray, as you could tell, is very old. It's one of my personal favorite movies ever. I also even really like U.S. Marshals, but The Fugitive is The Fugitive. I think that's Harrison Ford's best performance, even more than movies like Indiana Jones or any of the Star Wars movies. Field of Dreams. What can you say about Field of Dreams? One of the best movies ever, one of the most heartwarming films ever. Really just cements the fact that Kevin Costner can't make a bad baseball movie. And Forrest Gump. I know that it's cool now to hate on Forrest Gump, but I still love Forrest Gump. It's one of my go-to feel-good movies. Think it's fantastic. If you haven't seen Forrest Gump, what are you doing? How have you not seen Forrest Gump? Oh wait, my wife hasn't seen Forrest Gump. Alright, continuing on, we regroup and we move on. Next up on the list, we got Hell or High Water. This is a fantastic film. I actually haven't checked out this 4K yet. I just recently upgraded from my previous Blu-ray, but I think that is a great movie. Chris Pine, Ben Foster, Jeff Bridges give some great movies. Everyone knows Yellowstone for Taylor Sheridan, but he knocked it out of the park there. The first movie in the Color of Money double feature, you got The Hustler. Paul Newman probably should have won the best actor for this one, but he would have ended up winning it in The Color of Money for the same exact character, so that's pretty cool. Gus Van Zant's Good Will Hunting. This movie, written by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, starring them two and Robin Williams. Fantastic film. You know, if you're into Garden Wood and all that jazz, it's the kind of movie for you. Ghost. This is actually a great Paramount Presents release. I've always been a big fan of Ghost. This is one that I saw way too young. I remember seeing this in kindergarten. That's why I always associate with the real thing that's going to happen to me when I die. I take it on fact that it's what happens in the movie Ghost. So I don't know if that's true or not. Flatliners. This is one of Arrow Video's best transfers as far as 4Ks go, and also the packaging is so unique. The material on this is like almost suede. I absolutely love that. The Fault in Our Stars. This is one of the saddest movies that you'll ever see in your life. First Reformed. This is one of the most depressing movies you'll ever see in your life. Foxcatcher. I never want to see this movie again. I'm just going to put it in the doubles pile. Fearless. This is a great Jeff Bridges movie. One of my personal favorites from him. 12 Years a Slave. This is another one that's a really tough watch. And now we're going to get into some Stanley Kubrick movies, so these aren't alphabetized, so you get Full Metal Jacket on 4K, really an impressive 4K. The first half of that movie we all can agree is better than the second half. Clockwork Orange, good 4K, not the best 4K, but I love the steelbook I have for this. Speaking of steelbooks that I absolutely love, my Shining steelbook. This is another one that I love. I love how they put the maze on here, and then if you look really close, it says, all work, no play makes Jack a dull boy. Perfect. I have 2001 A Space Odyssey on 4K. This is a recent edition. It's one of the best 4Ks ever. I feel like it's been noted many times, and that still is true today. And then I have the Clockwork Orange on Blu-ray, so I'm going to put that in the doubles pile. Alright, continuing in drama, since it's the most I have, we got The Hunt for Red October. Great movie, great steelbook. I, Tonya, one of Margot Robbie's best performances. It's kind of getting forgotten. Another movie that's very similar to Goodfellas. Check this one out. It's a great story. Juice. I might actually be the first review I did solo here on the channel. Great steelbook, great 4K. One I'm actually looking forward to revisiting. Knives Out, recent edition as far as 4Ks. I got it really cheap for Black Friday before Glass Onion came out. La La Land, another Damien Chazelle film. It's probably my second favorite from him. I love La La Land, and I do not like musicals, but La La Land speaks to me. Chase your dreams, everyone. Little Women. Greta Gerwig's second film. I still think even over Barbie, this is her best film. It's a remake that's been done numerous times over the years. It's based on, I believe, an 1800s novel. I can't remember the exact date, but this one is the best of all the versions, even better than the 90s one. Lost in Translation. We're going to be getting a Kino Lorber 4K of this year, so very excited about that because I love that movie. Leon the Professional. Now, this is a do I have the other one? I actually had the previous Blu-ray that's going to go into the seconds pile. And then this 4K is also one of my favorite 4Ks. I just say watch the theatrical cut personally, but I do know people who prefer the extended cut of this. The Last Detail, this is a recent one. I actually reviewed this on the channel. I'd never seen this before I got this 4K. 4K is great. It's a very old movie from the 1970s, and it really put Jack Nicholson on the map. Got him the job in One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, actually. Limitless. This is a movie that came out the year me and my wife started dating, so it actually means a lot to us. And it's also a very interesting, low sci-fi kind of tale. Also features Robert De Niro and Bradley Cooper in the starring role. LA Confidential should have beat Titanic for Best Picture the year it came out. I actually got that with a slipcover, which I really appreciate. The Lincoln Lawyer. This has a 4K release, but I got this Blu-ray before that 4K came out, and this isn't one I revisit all the time. It came out early during the Matthew McConaughey reconnaissance, if you will. Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World. This movie is a very underrated film from the early 2000s. It was actually supposed to be a film series. It just never came to be. The Maltese Falcon. This is one we've gotten for Warner Brothers' 100th anniversary. I got a really nice slipcover on it. Great 4K as well. Awesome movie. One of the movies that put noir on the map. John Huston directed that one. It's an absolute classic. Mississippi Burning. This is actually a Kino Lorber Blu-ray that I have had for years. This one needs a big 4K upgrade. Mississippi Burning is an awesome movie. Willem Dafoe is great in this movie, but Gene Hackman steals the show, as Gene Hackman usually does. Now, this is my wife's Blu-ray. Magic Mike. Is this the first one? Yes, this is a Blu-ray that my wife got. See the $5 tag. This is the first Magic Mike, I believe. Directed by Steven Soderbergh. I actually haven't seen this movie. I know that there's a trilogy. I believe all of them were directed by Steven Soderbergh, if I am correct. Midnight Run. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. Probably one of the best buddy comedy duo movies. This movie, Charles Grodin, Robert De Niro just knock it out of the park. The Magnificent Seven, like we were talking about earlier with Seven Samurai. This was inspired by Seven Samurai. It's almost basically a remake of it, but that's also a great 4K. The Notebook. People who say this movie sucks are lying because this is a great movie. Is it schmaltzy? Absolutely, but it's still a great movie. Network. One of the best movies of the 1970s, and it's a movie that's message still rings very true today. The Nice Guys. Shane Black knows how to write and direct buddy cop movies, and this might be his best. Despite directing Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and writing Lethal Weapon, I still think that this is his best movie. It's not better than Lethal Weapon, but out of the movies he's written or directed, for him, this is his best. I absolutely love that movie. We're supposed to get a sequel one day. 9 Days. This is a movie that really kind of doesn't get appreciated. I remember the year this came out, I was the first person, I believe, to review this on Best Buy, so no one really knows that this Winston Duke and Zazie Beetz starring film is out there. I absolutely love this movie. If you see the movie Sold, this is like a more adult-oriented version of that. You have to kind of win a contest, essentially, to go and be a human being on Earth, but there's so much more to that. It's a very philosophical film, which is the kind of movies I absolutely love, and this is definitely one that I love. The Northman. Now, this is Robert Eggers' latest film. For me, he's 3 for 3, but I do think that this is the weakest of his 3 films. I don't think this is as good as The Witch or The Lighthouse, but I do really still enjoy this movie. Point Break. What else can I say about Point Break? Catherine Bigelow directed this. It came out the week after Terminator 2. We desperately need a 4K because this Blu-ray is very old, but Prisoners. Now, this movie is a stone cold classic. This is really what put Denis Villeneuve on the map. This is kind of before he started doing the big blockbusters. That's why I say Denis Villeneuve, very similar to Christopher Nolan. They're making these big blockbusters, but they're also highly intelligent blockbusters. This isn't a blockbuster, but this movie tells a great tale, starring Jake Gyllenhaal and starring Hugh Jackman. And then, speaking of very underrated movies, The Place Beyond the Pines. This movie is fantastic. A lot of twists and turns in this one. Great score, great energy. Just a great cast. This movie is one of the best, honestly. It's so underrated. Next up, we got Platoon. This is another 4K I remember people not loving. The only complaint I had is I thought it might have just looked too good because it just kind of looked like at points that they were on sets. but it's still a great film, great 4K. Philadelphia, I got this one on 4K. I used to have the previous Blu-ray before this. Philadelphia, like I said, is one of my personal favorites. Denzel Washington, Tom Hanks, love both of them. They do a great job in this movie, dealing with the AIDS pandemic that was going on at the time, how everyone felt about it. It's a very topical film, and it's just a great one that's going to leave you crying at the end. Phantom Thread. Now, Paul Thomas Anderson doesn't have a lot of his movies on 4K, but Phantom Thread is on 4K. I still want Boogie Nights on 4K, but Phantom Thread is a great film. It's actually probably in his top 5 films. Daniel Day-Lewis's last performances in this movie, and he knocks it out of the park in there as well. The Quick and the Dead. This is a Western from Sam Raimi starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Sharon Stone, Russell Crowe, Gene Hackman. I mean, a stacked cast. This is a fun Western, too. That's what I can honestly say to describe this one. It's just fun. It's not one of the greatest Westerns ever, but the 4K, I still actually haven't checked this out. I bought it in a sale, and I haven't checked it out yet. I'm looking forward to that. Road to Perdition. Now, this is a very, very, very underrated film. This came out from Sam Mendes. It's one of the rare times you get to see Tom Hanks playing a villain, even though he isn't a full-fledged villain in this one. It's just not often we see him with that gear. He does a great job in here. Daniel Craig, before he plays James Bond, is in this as well. Jude Law playing just a ridiculously scary performance in that. That is a great underrated movie. Rain Man, Tom Cruise, Dustin Hoffman. Just reviewed this 4K here on the channel. It's a great movie, great 4K. Requiem for a Dream, one of the toughest movies to watch, but this does have a great 4K. But again, very, very, very hard movie to watch. The Rocky Collection. This has gotten some flack. Overall, it's a great collection. There's always those rumors now that we're going to get a complete collection at the end of the year, which would just absolutely piss me off. But this is still a pretty nice collection. Look at this. James Dean, Rebel Without a Cause. I bought the steelbook version of this. This is also a great piece to have in your collection, especially if you're a fan of James Dean. And this movie, you know, surprisingly has stood the test of time, just like James Dean does. Steve Jobs. I've talked about this movie in the past. This is one of the best movies that nobody ever talks about. Michael Fassbender gives an iconic performance in this movie. This movie basically just takes place during 3 keynote events, and we get to see how Steve Jobs, played by Michael Fassbender, has changed and the characters around him. Just a great, great Aaron Sorkin screenplay there. Singing in the Rain, one of the most famous movies of all time. I love this 4K. I'm not a big musical guy like I've told you guys in the past, but this is definitely a kind of musical I can get behind. I still really enjoy it. It's not my favorite movie ever, but man, what a great 4K. Rush. This is from the early 1990s. Jason Patrick and Jennifer Jason Leigh. Sam Elliott pops up in this movie. Really a great tale, and if you wouldn't believe it, if you go back and look at the Tears in Heaven Eric Clapton music video, it was actually made for this movie, if you could believe that. It's actually a pretty decent film, too. Scarface, Al Pacino. What more can you say about this Brian De Palma film that hasn't been said, other than that this Gold Edition 4K is fantastic. I actually have a steelbook version of just the regular Blu-ray myself. On the fence if I want to hold on to this, you know, I'm more into the films. I think I'm going to put this in the doubles pile. Straight Outta Compton. Now, there is a 4K for this. Haven't seen it, but the Blu-ray is actually really good. I saw this in theaters. I've always loved this movie. It's a great biopic. The Shawshank Redemption on 4K. One of the best movies ever made. I had the previous Blu-ray before this. It's crazy that it came out in a year where Forrest Gump, The Lion King, Pulp Fiction came out, and yet this movie's still fantastic. Still one of the best movies ever made. Sicario. Speaking of Denis Villeneuve, this movie has grown and grown every time I watch it, just because of how well made it is. The tension in this movie. Emily Blunt is just so good. Daniel Kaluuya gives a great performance, but Benicio del Toro, man, what a performance he does in this movie. Smokey and the Bandit. This is actually a surprisingly great 4K that doesn't get talked about. This movie came out in 1977, and while watching it, you wouldn't believe that because it just looks that good. Stand By Me. One of Rob Reiner's best. A great coming-of-age movie based on a Stephen King, I want to say, novella. Even get Richard Dreyfuss doing the voice work in here, doing the voiceover work, even though he says he doesn't remember doing that. I don't believe him. Sneakers. One of the best movies from the early 1990s. It's actually my favorite Robert Redford movie. It moves along at a great pace. Also, I just love Ben Kingsley. Sleepers. This was the first Kevin Bacon movie I saw. Kevin Bacon plays a child rapist in this movie. It really tainted how I view Kevin Bacon for the rest of my life. And it's not his fault. That's what makes it crazy. It's the movie's fault. Speaking of, I mean, I didn't plan on that. Spotlight, dealing with the Catholic Church and them covering up them molesting children. Spotlight is one of the most important movies to come out over the last 20 years. Won Best Picture. Michael Keaton again in another Best Picture winner. He was really on a nice run there. Also really underappreciated for his performance in the movie The Founder. I love that movie as well. I don't own that. Next up, Streets of Fire. One of my personal favorites. Again, I'm not a musical guy, but this 4K is fantastic. It's really one you should own. Has some great music in there, especially if you're a fan of 80s music. Jim Steinman does a lot of music in that. The Swimmer. Now, this is actually a great Blu-ray. I saw this for the first time this year. I remember I read it on a list of like the best films of the 1960s. I had to see it. I only really knew Burt Lancaster best from Field of Dreams, but he does such a good job in this movie. I absolutely adored this movie. You know, not many movies from the 1960s are dealing with mental illness like that movie is. Next up, Taken. What more can you say about Taken other than that I have a really particular set of skills? Titanic. This is that nice Blu-ray edition that came out a few years ago. Supposedly we're going to get a 4K of this very soon because this Blu-ray has a skip in it that really bothers me. Training Day, there is a 4K. Training Day has a 4K out, but I only have the Blu-ray edition. 4K is a big jump from this, from what Matt tells me, so I will be grabbing that at some point. The Truman Show. Now this is a huge upgrade over a previous 4K, and this is the one that really showed that Jim Carrey can do more than just comedy. I personally really love The Truman Show. The Town. Now I remember this 4K went out of print, and then they re-released it in this steelbook, and I had to make sure I got it right away. This is probably Ben Affleck's best directed film. I really do enjoy Air, but this actually is probably better. Terms of Endearment. There's also rumors that this is going to get a new 4K release this year. This is one of my go-to sad movies. It's one of the saddest movies you'll ever watch, but it's also a great movie. James L. Brooks directed, who came from sitcoms, worked on shows like The Simpsons, which came out after this, but he was a big sitcom director, and you feel that in this because everything is told very dark, but it's also told very lighthearted. He somehow finds the perfect balance, and Jack Nicholson again pops up, steals the show. That's what Jack Nicholson does best. And then last but not least in the drama section, we got Tombstone. Tombstone from 1993, one of the best westerns of all time, featuring one of the best performances of all time that just doesn't get any love. I know that James here, who watches the channel, he knows who I'm talking to. He's a big fan of Tombstone. I know it's one of his favorite movies of all time. Val Kilmer just steals that movie, but really Kurt Russell does a great job, and he basically directed it. And then last in the dramas is my Sony Pictures Classic 30th anniversary box set. I started reviewing this. I didn't finish all the reviews, but it's still one of my favorite pieces in my collection. I love all of these 4Ks in here. They're all really top shelf 4Ks. Just absolutely adore every single one of them here in the collection. Just continuing in the drama a little bit, we got Tar, which is one of the best movies from last year. Unforgiven is one of my favorite movies of all time. Actually, that's my first 4K Blu-ray, if you could believe that one. The Untouchables, which I did review here on the channel. Another Brian De Palma film starring Kevin Costner and Sean Connery in one of his better roles during that resurgence during the 1980s. Vanilla Sky. I actually saw this on a worst Tom Cruise list, which really surprised me because I really love Vanilla Sky. And that 4K, big upgrade. Great job from Paramount on that one. The Verdict. This is probably Paul Newman's best character. He does a great job in this movie playing this just washed up lawyer who's down on his luck, who just needs a win, and he gets involved in one of the hardest cases of his life, and it's such an important case, and the movie itself, perfect. Whiplash, another Denis Villeneuve film. This is the one that put him on the map. It's actually based on his own short film. I think J.K. Simmons appears in both of them. J.K. Simmons would win an Academy Award for this movie, giving a stone-cold killer performance in that movie. The Wizard of Oz, great 4K Blu-ray. One of the movies that has stood the test of time. Most people credit this with the rise in color in film. That scene where the door opens and we go from black and white to color. Still one of the most iconic transitions in film history. Stands the test of time. You'll just never forget that. It's amazing that a movie in 1939 means so much nowadays. White Men Can't Jump. This is a movie that meant so much to my childhood. Me, my mother, my brother used to watch this so much when we were growing up. Still one of my favorites. I can't believe they remade that. Although my wife told me the remake, not bad. Wild at Heart. This is the movie that David Lynch took a break from making Twin Peaks to make. And it's basically based on The Wizard of Oz, funny enough. And then my last drama film is Wild Things. And this is from Arrow Video. This is one of those classic hard cases. This movie it's great. It's basically just a soap opera, and that's, I think, what they were spoofing with this movie, where there's just so many twists and turns. And Bill Murray pops up in this movie also. Fantastic. He's so funny in that movie. And then I just wanted to show you guys some of my Vinegar Syndrome releases that I own. Now, the big one is Roadhouse. I actually have the Blu-ray right here, which is going into the seconds pile. So, here it is, Roadhouse on 4K. One of my favorite pieces in my collection. I mean, just seriously, you pop this open. There is so much in here. There's a full review here on the channel, so I won't go too deep into it, but I absolutely love that piece. My most recent addition to my Vinegar Syndrome 4K collection, Freeway, starring Kiefer Sutherland and Reese Witherspoon, giving her career best performance. This movie just does not work without her. Hitman Hart. Now, this is not directly from Vinegar Syndrome. Vinegar Syndrome is the distributor of this, but it's about Bret Hart and following him around in 1997. They just happened to catch the Montreal Screwjob on film with this documentary. One of the most important documentaries out there. I had to have it. We got H.P. Lovecraft's From Beyond. This one was directed by Stuart Gordon. This and Reanimator are probably his two best films. And then what I think is the best Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, and this release is amazing, by the way, because you get the hard slipcover, and then you get another slipcover underneath, which is like semi-gloss and semi-matte. Like, they really just sprung for all the bells and whistles for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Love that. Death Wish 2 on 4K. Great release. I don't think this movie is as good as the first Death Wish, but the 4K is better than the first Death Wish 4K. And then Amityville Horror. This has a really nice slipcover too. Again, that Vinegar Syndrome semi-gloss, semi-matte type finish. This 4K is great. I'm not the biggest fan of the movie, but the 4K, really no debate on the quality on that. And now I'm going to dive into my John Carpenter films, because there is just so many of these. And right off the top, we got They Live on 4K. That's a classic. Prince of Darkness on 4K. One of his most underrated films. Big Trouble in Little China. I'm actually really surprised we haven't gotten a 4K release of this yet. One of Kurt Russell's best. Not my favorite when it comes to John Carpenter. Starman. This is a very underrated film. This is actually the only John Carpenter film to ever be nominated for an Academy Award. That was for Jeff Bridges for Best Actor. The score is great in that movie also. Escape from L.A. Not as good as Escape from New York, but it's so over the top and just silly and ridiculous with terrible CGI. Definitely worth a watch. I think you'll have fun with it. In the Mouth of Madness. Now, I've been waiting for a 4K release of this, and I'm sure it's going to happen at some point. It comes from Scream Factory. This is one of the better John Carpenter movies to come out in the 1990s. It stars Sam Neill. I believe this came out either the same year or the year after Jurassic Park, so it's pretty cool to have that movie on Blu-ray. Would like a 4K. Now, I have The Thing on Blu-ray and on 4K. The Thing itself, the Blu-ray, is going to go into my doubles pile. And this 4K is very underrated. I've seen people actually knock this 4K, and I couldn't disagree more. It's a great 4K. Christine. Now, this has one of the best 4K steelbooks out there. I just happen to not have that. I only have the 4K regular standard edition with no slipcover, but it is a great 4K. Escape from New York. I have the previous Blu-ray, and then I got the Scream Factory 4K Blu-ray that came out last year, and I believe this was from actually a Studio Canal scan, so it was previously released on 4K even before this. The Fog. I have the Blu-ray version, and then I have the 4K version. Now, I love the Blu-ray version because of the steelbook, but again, I gotta be honest with myself, we're cleansing the collection here today, so this Blu-ray, it's gotta go in the doubles pile because this 4K is my new standard. Now, Halloween is unique because I have it on 4K twice. There's the Lionsgate 4K, then there is the Scream Factory 4K, and you also have it where they have a different color temperature on the Scream Factory 4K. So it's really going to come down to preference. They're both good. They're both different. So I think I'm going to keep them both just because, you know what? They are differences. It really depends on how you're feeling. I think this one is more fall, so I think this is the one you're going to want to watch for the fall. Assault on Precinct 13. This was John Carpenter's, not his first feature film, but this is the one that put him on the map. I believe this is the one that got him the job to do Halloween. And even though this isn't technically John Carpenter, but I figured I'd keep the Halloween, you know, at least the original one with the other ones. But this is the entire Scream Factory Blu-ray release that came out years ago. There was actually a really nice collection that came out, but I have this one that just has all the discs and two individual Blu-ray boxes, kind of flipping through it, where you get to pick the disc that you want to watch. They used to have it individually boxed like they did with their Friday the 13th set, but I have this one, and it's still a really nice piece, and is one of my favorites in my collection, so I keep that with John Carpenter. Alright, we're going to dive into some horror, and right off the top I'm going to show you guys my Blue Underground 4Ks. I have Maniac. This is a great film, I believe from 1980. Great 4K, and all the Blue Underground, so you got Zombie, great 4K as well. They're all great 4K transfers. Your mileage may vary as far as the films. This isn't a 4K from Blue Underground, it's from Synops Films. They just have a Blu-ray of Maniac, so they have the rights to the first Maniac Cop, but Maniac Cop 2 and 3 are on 4K from Blue Underground. Maniac Cop 3 and Maniac Cop 2 also have really nice slip covers on them. Blue Underground stuff doesn't go on sale much, and these went on sale, so I had to grab them. And they're great films. Great slasher films. You know, very low budget, but they really do hold up. Then I'll dive into my Edgar Wright collection here, because I have all of his films either on Blu-ray. Actually, I think almost all of his films are on 4K. So I do have the Shaun of the Dead steelbook that's going to go into my doubles collection. You get the triple feature, the Cornetto trilogy on 4K. That's Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fudge, and At World's End. All three of these are great. I just rewatched that entire 4K trilogy recently. Then I have the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World 4K steelbook. I had to have this steelbook because I absolutely loved it, but I haven't watched that 4K yet. Last Night in Soho on 4K, and Baby Driver on 4K. Both great 4Ks. Last Night in Soho is a great movie. It's not as good as I remembered it being in theaters. It's still a great movie from my rewatch. And Baby Driver still holds up. I love that movie. And these are my Evil Dead Blu-rays in 4K. So I have the original Evil Dead on Blu-ray. Don't have the 4K of that. I love the yellow. I love this color yellow-green. I'm a big fan of that. Evil Dead 2 I have on 4K. Army of Darkness has this great, the definitive edition of Army of Darkness, which is maybe my favorite of the entire Evil Dead franchise. You get every cut of the film on here, but the theatrical cut's on 4K and it looks great. It's supposed to look cheap on perfect, and they nailed that look. And then you get the Evil Dead remake. Now, I don't have Rise of the Evil of the Dead yet, or Evil Dead Rise, rather. I don't have that yet, but I will have that pretty soon. And they just announced Scream 3 on 4K, so I have the original 1996's Scream on 4K. Then I have the entire Scream 1 through 4 collection. Scream 2 on 4K, which I think is the worst in the franchise, but still a great film. And then I have Scream on 4K, or Scream 5, whatever you want to call it. I hate what they did with this, calling the Scream. I get what they were going for, because it's making fun of, it's supposed to be very meta, making fun of all the reboots and remakes that come out that just go by the same name. But at the same time, now I have two Screams. So I get what you're going for. Don't love it, though. Now we're going to my Friday the 13th, and I have Freddy vs. Jason on its own, and I have this previous Paramount release that only features the first 8 films in the Friday the 13th collection, and that is going to go into my seconds pile because I have the definitive edition of the Scream Factory Blu-ray releases, which have new scans. None of them are on 4K, but there are new 4K scans, especially for certain ones, mainly the first Friday the 13th, I think the second one, and then you also get new scans for Jason Goes to Hell. So you're really getting them all in here. The entire collection is in here, which I really do appreciate. You know, you get, if you guys floating around and looking, really a nice piece here. I'm going to put that right back on the shelf because I like where it is on my shelf. And then these are just going to be a bunch of random 4Ks and Blu-rays of horror movies. You get The Exorcist 3 from Scream Factory on 4K. The Hills Have Eyes from Arrow Video on 4K. Hellraiser and Hellraiser Hellbound, Hellraiser and Hellraiser 2 Hellbound 2 on 4K, whatever you want to call it. Am I getting tongue twisted? Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, let's call it that. That's what it says on the cover. My Bloody Valentine, Scream Factory Blu-ray release. 4K is coming out, so gotta wait for that. The Howling on 4K Blu-ray. We were talking about this recently, comparing it. It's always going to get compared to An American Werewolf in London, but this is still one of the best releases on 4K. Day of the Dead. This is a lot of people's favorite in the franchise. Not my personal favorite. So I had this Universal Candyman import as my previous Blu-ray for Candyman, and then I have Candyman on 4K from Scream Factory. This is my favorite horror film ever, so I had to have this on 4K. Just looking at it right now kind of makes me want to watch it, if I'm being honest with you guys. That's going to go in my seconds pile. The Funhouse from Tobe Hooper. This is a great film. Also a great 4K. Really puts me in the Halloween mood, actually. The People Under the Stairs. I just have the Blu-ray. I don't have the 4K that just came out. At least not yet. Because I just watched this Blu-ray last year. It's not one of my favorite Wes Craven movies. It's one of his best made, but it's not one of my favorites. So I don't feel compelled to get that 4K just yet. Speaking of Wes Craven, one of his most underrated films, and is in my top 5 from him. Shocker! Well, this movie shocked the hell out of me. Cursed shocked the hell out of me as well, just because of how goddamn bad it is. Matt loves this movie, and I don't get it. He made me buy this. I do not like Cursed. I'm going to keep it in my collection because I like the slipcover. Maybe one day I'll like it. Cat People. This is from Paul Schrader as well. This movie is surprisingly very enjoyable. The premise is crazy, but it's a really enjoyable film. House of Wax. Got this with a slipcover. This is another one that came and went from the 2000s, but it's a really fun summer horror film. And who doesn't want to see Paris Hilton get killed on camera? They went for it in that movie. The Return of the Living Dead. This is one of my favorite. This is my favorite zombie movie of all time. I absolutely love this movie, and this 4K does this film justice. Probably one of the best horror comedies ever also. My favorite David Cronenberg movie, Dead Ringers. Love this movie. Jeremy Irons gives his best career performance in this movie. He ended up winning the Academy Award for Reversal of Fortune the next year, but in my opinion, should have won it for this. I have a double feature here featuring Once Bitten and Love at First Bite. I only bought this for Once Bitten because Jim Carrey's in it and I hadn't seen it before, so I had to see it. Still haven't watched Love at First Bite yet because I just bought it for that. Watched that. And then I have here, I had just bought these and I haven't watched them yet. Happy Death Day and Happy Death Day to You on 4K. Seen them both, thought they were great. They're setting up a trilogy, but the second one didn't make enough money, I think, to warrant it, so that's unfortunate. So now we got my Robert Eggers movies besides The Northman. I had The Northman under drama, but as horror movies, you have movies like The Lighthouse. I have this here, which is really, really nice, by the way. It's basically a book. If you slide it out, and then you open it up. Now, this does come in a 4K disc. I thought I ordered a 4K disc. As you can see, it's a Blu-ray disc. I made a mistake, and I was too embarrassed to call up A24 to tell them. And I was like, okay, you know what? It's probably an upgrade over my previous Blu-ray, which you guys will see in a second. So I was happy to keep this. And then you got his first movie I have on 4K, The Witch. Now, there is a different edition that Robert Eggers saw over of The Witch, and this isn't that version. This is the version that the studio put out. He doesn't really like the color timing in this one. He prefers the other 4K, so one day I'll grab that and do a review on that. And I always put Robert Eggers and Ari Aster next to each other because they are the big directors in horror right now. The two of them, along with one other guy who we'll talk about in a second, but that other person right now is Ari Aster. So we got Hereditary and we got Midsommar. Those are his two movies. Midsommar is a great movie, but Hereditary, I think, is one of the best films, bar none, to come out in the last 10 years, not even just in horror. And that other third guy I was talking about was Mike Flanagan. Now, he'd done some great shows on Netflix, like The Haunting of Hill House, The Haunting of Bly Manor, and some other shows. Midnight Club came out this year, or last year. I thought it was really good. But you get Oculus. That was his first film he directed. Love that movie. Now, this is Ouija. This isn't the one he directed. This is the first film in the Ouija series. He directed this one, Ouija Origin of Evil, which is a much, much, much better film. It also has Henry Thomas in it. Henry Thomas appears in all of, or at least almost all of Michael Flanagan's projects, including The Haunting of Hill House, and he's also in Dr. Sleep as the bartender, so, or Jack Nicholson, depending how you want to look at that. Dr. Sleep's fantastic, so he does a great job in that. Alright, now it's just going to be random horror movies that I've pulled off my shelf, just that I just had sitting there that will eventually end up in order. So we get Jacob's Ladder from 1990, great movie by the way. One of my first Blu-rays, actually, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, and it looks like it's in 3D. Great movie, very underrated. Edward Scissorhands on Blu-ray. Great steelbook, that's why I bought that. Color Out of Space, surprisingly a 4K that really has some neon colors in it, eye-popping colors. No HDR though, very strange decision there. Creepshow, just recently reviewed this on the channel, great 4K as well. American Psycho, awesome 4K, awesome film. You'll notice I only have Halloween and Halloween Kills. These are the David Gordon Green remakes. I don't have Halloween Ends yet. I will get it eventually just to complete the collection, but I don't love that movie. Now, here's some Halloween movies that I do love. Halloween 2, the best Halloween film, Halloween 3, and Halloween 4 on 4K. And all three of those Scream Factory 4Ks with that hardcover are all great 4K releases. I highly recommend them. Reanimator, great Stuart Gordon film, probably his best film. David Cronenberg's son, Brandon Cronenberg, has put out a few films, and his best film, and this 4K, is also fantastic, and we're talking about Possessor. I've watched this film 3 times now. I just love it. I think it's better than his most recent film, Infinity Pool, in my opinion. Tremors. There is a nice collector's edition of this out there, but I have just the standard Arrow Video 4K release. The Crow. one of the most famous movies ever, and actually one of my personal favorites. And me and Lord Raiden here on the channel have been talking about getting a 4K of this release sometimes. This is the Blu-ray. Very bare bones. Speaking of bare bones Blu-rays, The Sixth Sense. This movie deserves definitely a 4K upgrade, and it's weird because we've gotten some other M. Night Shyamalan movies on 4K, and this is still probably his most famous film, and has one of the most famous twist endings in film history. The Frighteners also has a really nice 4K Blu-ray release that I don't own. I just have this bare bones Blu-ray release. This ended up in the wrong pile. This should be under the dramas, but Dog Day Afternoon is a great one. And this is one of the Blu-rays, In Search of Darkness. I have this and Part 2. Alien, I count this as a horror film because it really is just a very claustrophobic horror film. So Alien 4K, great 4K. Then I got Aliens on Blu-ray because there is no 4K of that yet. I have a previous Alien Blu-ray that's going to go in the doubles pile. And now these are my Child's Play. I have the Child's Play Chucky collection that came out a few years ago. This goes all the way up to Curse of Chucky. They came out with another set the following year that has Cult of Chucky. And then Scream Factory actually came out last year with Child's Play 1, Child's Play 2, and Child's Play 3 on 4K, and then you're going to get the rest of them this year on 4K. I will only be buying Bride of Chucky because, as you can see, I already own Seed of Chucky and Curse of Chucky, and I don't really care for Curse or Cult of Chucky, and I absolutely hate Seed of Chucky. I think it's one of the worst movies ever, not even just in horror. Sinister, one of the most underrated horror films ever, starring Ethan Hawke. This movie is one that I run back to all the time, and not many horror films get under my skin, but this one really did. Cursed Films. Now, this is a documentary series from Shudder. I have the first season here. It's basically just dealing about films that were cursed, talking about things that happened on the Twilight Zone movie or Poltergeist. You know, everyone talks about the Poltergeist curse, so you can find everything you need to know about that in that movie. In Search of Darkness Part 2. So here's the other half of that documentary. Actually, my name is in the credits because I was a backer of that movie. One of the only times I've ever done that. Hellfest. Now, this is a fun film that I still haven't seen. This is the only Underworld movie I own. There's a great 4K collection out there, but I only own the first one on Blu-ray. Slumber Party Massacre. Now, this was given to me by Matt when he got the 4K of Slumber Party Massacre and Slumber Party Massacre 2. Slumber Party Massacre 2, I supposedly haven't seen it yet, is a way better film. And then you got the Beetlejuice 4K, which is a huge upgrade over this Blu-ray that's going to be going into the doubles pile. The Nightmare on Elm Street collection. Now, this is all we got right now. We've been waiting for a new collection for a very long time. I got my fingers crossed that that's what we get this year from Scream Factory for their big Halloween release as a new collection, because this one is really old. And then I got Prometheus. I'm not a big fan of this movie. I bought this on sale, as you can see, for 10 bucks years ago. I think it was actually used. Not a big fan of that movie. So you got the original Pet Sematary, The Crazies, which is also a remake, Jigsaw, the Saw collection, and then I just have Saw on Blu-ray, which will go in the doubles pile. Psycho Goreman, one of the most underrated horror films to come out over the last, 10 years. Because it was made on such a shoestring budget, but this movie, as far as horror comedies go, if you're into horror comedies, this is one you're not going to want to miss. Then you got the It movies, It Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 on 4K, and then you get on Blu-ray the It miniseries. Jeepers Creepers on Blu-ray. The Predator on Blu-ray and with a nice steelbook. I'm not a big fan of that movie at all. The Final Destination 5 film collection. This was out of print for a while, so when it finally came back, I grabbed it. And it was pretty cheap. I think I only got it for 20 bucks. Summer of '84 also has a 4K Blu-ray release. I have the regular edition Blu-ray here. Very underrated horror film. Gremlins, got this one on 4K. I love the 4K Steelbook. It's not the biggest upgrade as far as Blu-ray to 4Ks go, but I'm really happy to have it on 4K because it still is an upgrade. Mandy, this is a regular standard edition Blu-ray. I liked this movie a lot the first time I saw it. When I went back and watched it the second time, it didn't have the same effect on me. Malignant, this is from James Wan. This is a very underrated movie that came out during the pandemic, and I don't think a lot of people remembered it because it is a fantastic film. 4K is great, but they released this movie on Blu-ray first and then waited a while to release it on 4K. I don't appreciate when they do things like that. Killer Clowns from Outer Space. This is one that really deserves a 4K. I really do not like the box art in this Blu-ray. Really doesn't fit the style of the film. The Ring. Now, this is a great Blu-ray. Needs a 4K upgrade, but I do love this steelbook that it came out. And I was happy to finally have it on Blu-ray because the previous editions were very hard to get a hold of, or you might get a really terrible copy of it. And I know that happened to Matt, actually. And then I have the previous edition of Poltergeist on Blu-ray, and then a big upgrade on 4K with this really nice steelbook. I love this steelbook. Really one of my favorites in my collection, personally. This will end up in the doubles pile. Cabin in the Woods, great Lionsgate Steelbook. Not a new scam when it came out on 4K last year because it originally had previously been released on 4K, but I really wanted this Steelbook. The Midnight Meat Train. This is actually a very underrated horror film. Fun. Insidious Chapter 1 on 4K. Great film on 4K. It's still the best Insidious film also. Warm Bodies. Saw this for the first time this year. Great 4K as well. Phenomena. Now this is a very good looking 4K. The movie itself, not particularly for me, but it's something I will be going back to because I want to watch it again because it's still very enjoyable, but just not the best movie. Especially if we're talking Dario Argento. And now we're going to talk a little bit of Jordan Peele, so we get his first film on 4K, Get Out, one that really put him on the map as a horror director, then which I like more than that, and that is Us. I still think Us is his best film in my opinion, and the 4K is great. Nope, I also really love Nope. The 4K, though, has something that really annoys me, that they put this underneath the 4K logo. I'll always get annoyed by that, but the 4K itself is really nice. That drives me nuts. Then we got the Predator Triple Feature Collection. It's somewhere in here is my 4K of Predator, but this is the only one that I have. This is the collection that I have, and I also have The Predator on Blu-ray, which you guys saw over there with the Steelbook. The Fly. This one deserves a 4K upgrade. This is probably David Cronenberg's most famous film. Not my favorite of his films, but it's still a top 3 Cronenberg movie. What We Do in the Shadows, probably most famous now for its TV show, but the original Taika Waititi movie is fantastic. Tons of laughs in there. It's one I watch every single Halloween season. Hocus Pocus, speaking of Halloween, hopefully we get Hocus Pocus 2 on 4K, but the original one is a great 4K, and I had the previous Blu-ray as well, so the Blu-ray is going to have to go in the doubles pile. 1408, great movie, one of the most underrated Stephen King adaptations. It's based on a short story, and they ended up making a great film out of it. John Cusack gives one of the only performances where I actually like John Cusack. Samuel L. Jackson is great in it as well. Trick or Treat. This is a great film that came out. I mean, it's a big cult film that is finally getting the recognition that it deserves. I love that movie. Arachnophobia. This is a great film as well that came out in the early 1990s that's supposedly getting a remake. Carrie. Now, there is a really nice Scream Factory version of this, and I don't love this Blu-ray that I have, but I'm also not the biggest Carrie fan. I do need to grab that Blu-ray, that 4K though. Bram Stoker's Dracula. This is the previous 4K that doesn't have Dolby Vision on it, but it's still a pretty good one, and Matt's review for it said that Dolby Vision was actually not as good as the HDR. I Know What You Did Last Summer. Not a big fan of this movie. This Blu-ray was given to me, or I wouldn't even buy it. Same thing with this movie. I've just never seen Arizona. I hear it's great, but it was given to me. Matt bought it at a thrift store, and he gave it to me, so why would I say no to it? The Lost Boys on 4K. Great 4K. I love this movie. It's not my favorite I actually prefer Flatliners to this, which features a lot of the same cast. Eli Roth's History of Horror. This was a gift from Matt as well. The Descent. Now, this is a very enjoyable horror film that's come out over the last 20 years that I really enjoy as well. Angel Heart, another one of those Lionsgate Steelbooks. Love these Steelbooks. Anaconda. Matt gave this to me. I hate this movie. VFW. Haven't seen it, but again, Matt gave this to me because he has the 4K. The Invisible Man. I want the 4K of this. This was Lee Winnell's follow-up to Upgrade. I really enjoyed this movie. Not as much as Upgrade, but it's still a very enjoyable movie, and you can see what Lee Winnell is going for in his films. You get the Universal Classic Monsters 4Ks. I got part 1 and part 2. I love these 4Ks. I can't wait to check them out. I haven't seen them all yet as far as these collections go, but I want to do a full watch through this Halloween, so I'm really looking forward to that. If you guys want reviews of that, let me know as well. A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place Part 2 on 4K. I love both of these movies. They're very similar to each other. I would say that they're both like 8 out of 10s. They don't ever hit the highs of a lot of other 4Ks, but these are still really good 4Ks. Here's my regular Lighthouse Blu-ray. I'm really looking forward to doing a comparison of the two Blu-rays, but this is one that's going to probably go in the doubles pile now. And then we also get Alfred Hitchcock's 4K Blu-ray collection. There is a part 2 to this, but this one features, which is my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie, Vertigo, and then you also get Rear Window in here. Psycho and The Bird. So some of his most popular films. Probably the only other really popular Alfred Hitchcock movie missing is North by Northwest, but I don't know who has the rights to that because that's not even included in the part 2. And Alfred Hitchcock has directed so many movies, but I think a lot of people agree that like movies like Psycho and Vertigo are probably his 2 best movies. Vertigo is still my favorite of all of his movies. Alright, now we're going to dive into comedies, and we're going to start off with the holiday comedy. So you get John Hughes, which I think is his best film, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Home Alone Steelbook, and then Home Alone on 4K. This Steelbook is going to go into the doubles pile. The Santa Claus, one of my favorite films. It's a Wonderful Life, I think, is a Christmas staple and is the best Christmas film of all time, even though it's pretty dark, but it's still the best Christmas film of all time. You get The Family Man, starring Nicolas Cage. This is a very underrated Christmas movie. Die Hard, the ultimate Christmas movie. My Planes, Trains, and Automobiles 4K, which disappoints me to no end. Why I hold on to this? I don't know. Home Alone 2 on Blu-ray. Black Christmas. Not exactly a Christmas movie, but the name is Black Christmas. So even though it doesn't make you feel warm and fuzzy in your belly, it's still a Christmas movie and one that you should watch around Christmas time. The Polar Express from Warner Brothers. This is a fantastic 4K and a great movie. One that doesn't get the appreciation it deserves. Office Christmas Party, another underrated Christmas film. Elf. I still need to upgrade to the 4K for this one. A Christmas Story, really nice 4K here, a huge upgrade over the previous Blu-ray, and Christmas Vacation, the second best Christmas movie, only behind It's a Wonderful Life. Then you got Anchorman, one of the funniest films ever, still quotable to this day, starring Will Ferrell. National Security, this one is great. I love this movie. One of Martin Lawrence's most underrated performances. A lot of people my age remember this, but a lot of people also don't remember it. I don't know why, kind of just another one that came and went. The Campaign, very, very funny movie. The Other Guys, one of Will Ferrell's best. Him and Mark Wahlberg make a great duo. I quote this movie all of the time. When was the last time you did your last Despot? September of 2000. And then he fires the gun off. Why'd you do that? They were so convincing with their arguments. I love that movie. Step Brothers, again. This movie, the only thing that stops it from being a 5-star comedy is the Catalina wine mixer. The fucking Catalina wine mixer ruins that movie. Semi-Pro, very underrated movie. Get the funk out of my face. Get the funk out of my face. Talladega Nights, Shake and Bake, baby. Absolutely love that movie. One of the most underrated comedies of all time, K-9. I know that movie gets compared a lot to Turner and Hooch. You gotta pick a side. I don't. I like them both. I think they're both fantastic and comedy classics of the 80s. Old School. What more can I say about Old School? Really put Will Ferrell on the map as a comedian who could star in films. Before that, he was just really known for SNL. Jumanji, one of my childhood favorites. There is a 4K of this out there, but I don't own that yet. Pain and Gain. One of Michael Bay's best films, actually. Straightforward movie. I heard complaints about this because it's a true story and they told it in a comedic way. And I understand those complaints, but I still think the movie is really good. Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Definitely one of the better 2000s movies. One of those Judd Apatow comedies that were coming out around that era. Mila Kunis has never been better, and either is Jason Segel. Parenthood. I love this movie. This is a John Hughes movie. Not a John Hughes movie. This is a Ron Howard movie, again, starring Steve Martin, America's Dad, which I always find fascinating. He plays a dad so well. He didn't become a dad himself until he was in his 70s. Legally Blonde 1 and 2. Not my favorite movies, but my wife loves these. Friday, and this is the director's extended cut. I personally prefer the theatrical cut of this movie because it kind of adds jokes, takes away some jokes, and I think the original version is much better. But you only get the extended cut on this. Tommy Boy. This one is a classic. You can get a pretty good look at a steak by sticking your head up a cow's ass, but I think I'd rather trust the butcher than that. Easy A. This movie is one that really reminds me of high school. Came out the year I graduated, so it kind of everything in that movie kind of just speaks to me, even if I wasn't a girl in high school. My Cousin Vinny. I just rewatched this movie. This is a stone cold classic. Marissa Tomei definitely deserved the Academy Award for this. The only thing that's distracting now as an adult is the big age gap between Joe Pesci and Marissa Tomei, but everyone does a great job in that, even Ralph Macchio. Then you get, yes, this is a comedy, The Room. Tommy Wiseau's classic? Maybe for all the wrong ways. Big, one of my favorite movies ever. This actually used to, when you open up, it used to play music. It doesn't anymore. But I absolutely love Big, one of my favorite movies. Penny Marshall directed that. Made me fall in love with Tom Hanks' my movie's probably why he's still my favorite actor of all time. Horrible Bosses. The first one is a classic. The second one is pretty good. 48 Hours. I think the original is way better than the sequel. 48 Hours is really what put Eddie Murphy on the map as far as an actor. You know, he was on SNL at the time, but this is where he shot to superstardom, is with 48 Hours. And here he is again with Coming to America, which I think is also one of his best films, and show that he can play multiple roles in a film. I love this movie. The 40-Year-Old Virgin. I mean, this is where Judd Apatow and all of his buddies got put on the map. Steve Carell came out the same year as The Office. Hot Tub Time Machine. The less said about the sequel, the better, but the original is a classic. The Jerk. I mean, this is really what put Steve Martin on the map as an actor. Again, before this movie, he was really just a stand-up comedian, but this is a really funny one that still holds up. Just announced for a 4K by Kino Lorber, by the way. Uncle Buck. I always love this movie. It's probably my second favorite John Hughes movie. If you can't tell, I love John Candy. It's really sad that he died so young because he gave us so much in such a short period of time. Wayne's World. This is a great 4K. Great steelbook. The first and the second one are both great films. I would have really liked them to include Wayne's World 2 in here because I think they are very equal to each other. This isn't a movie that I run back to personally. Mel Brooks, Spaceballs. The steelbook was actually given to me. There is a Kino Lorber 4K, but I don't go back to that one as much. It's not my favorite Mel Brooks movie. Shout selects release of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. This is just the first film. They had previously released a double pack with Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. There's also the 3 movies out now. I only own the first. Fast Times at Richmond High. There's a really nice Criterion Blu-ray release of this, but I only have this version. Again, that's not a movie I truly always run back to. Dave. I think this is one of the most underrated comedies of the 1990s. Sigourney Weaver does great work in this movie, but Kevin Kline. Kevin Kline is one of those actors we don't appreciate enough. Mrs. Doubtfire. Ebenezer Doubtfire, my dear. Robin Williams, one of his best performances, probably one of his most famous performances. He does a great job in this movie. Fletch, there is a sequel to this and a remake, but the original is a classic. The Hangover Part 2, you'll notice that this is the only one I have, and that's because this was given to me. Groundhog Day, this is the 4K steelbook that came out earlier this year. I love this movie. The steelbook 4K is a big upgrade over the previous 4K release that came out a few years ago, and it's a big upgrade over the previous Blu-ray releases, which I had. Now, these movies actually have 4K releases. I don't own them, from Sony no less, but 21 and 22 Jump Street. 21 Jump Street was not supposed to be as good as it turned out to be. That movie is definitely hysterical. One of the best comedies to come out over the last 15 years is This Is the End. I love this movie. Everybody is doing a great job. Danny McBride probably steals the movie. Him and Jonah Hill have some of my favorite laughs in that. And then this is one that just got recommended to me recently, and I finally saw it. There's a review on the channel. 3 O'Clock High. One of the most underrated movies of the 1980s. Waiting. I remember seeing this in theaters. I remember the trailer for this. This is a great movie, one that I truly love as well. Speaking of Jim Carrey, we're going to have some Jim Carrey movies coming up right now with Liar Liar from 1997. Has some of my biggest laughs between me, my mother, and my aunt. We still quote this movie to this day. This was a big one in my house growing up. Dumb and Dumber, the best comedy film of all time. This Blu-ray is only the unrated cut, which really drives me nuts because it doesn't include the theatrical cut. You can only watch it in the unrated cut, and I think it's a flawed version because Dumb and Dumber is the greatest comedy of all time, but you can only watch the original cut on DVD, VHS, but not on Blu-ray. The Mask. This is also one of my favorite movies of all time. 1994, Jim Carrey was killing it. You know, we had, well, this is the sequel, Ace Ventura When Nature Calls. This came out 1 year later in 1995. But in 1994, we had Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. We also had Super Troopers. This is a classic comedy. I haven't seen the sequel yet. Booksmart. This is actually a very underrated movie. Olivia Wilde's directorial debut. Really enjoyed this film when it came out. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. Talking about dodgeball here. Another underrated comedy is Popstar, Never Stop, Never Stopping. If you're a fan of The Lonely Island and what they do in music, you're going to love this movie. It's basically a spoof and a satire. Speaking of spoofs and satires, another underrated comedy that came out, I want to say like 2009? I was in high school when it came out. MacGruber. Will Forte was born to play this role. I love everything he does in this movie. It's downright hysterical. If you haven't seen this movie, you're really missing out. And I know a lot of people haven't. Wedding Crashers. One of the biggest comedies of the year it came out. I want to say it was like 2005. I think this might have came out either the same year or the year after. So maybe it's 2006 after The Notebook, because The Notebook came out the same year as Red Eye. Barbie. The Birdcage. This movie is great. Nathan Lang and Robin Williams have great chemistry. Gene Hackman is fantastic in this movie. And Diane Wiest, she's always great whatever she pops up in. Office Space. I love Office Space. It's so topical as you become an adult, because when I saw this as a kid, it wasn't as relatable as it is now. Kindergarten Cop. Arnold Schwarzenegger can do comedy as long as he's got Ivan Reitman in the director's chair. He also directed Twins. Ted and Ted 2. Ted is great. Ted 2, it's alright. Happy Gilmore. I think this is Adam Sandler's best or his second best film. It might be The Wedding Singer is his best. Now, this triple feature drives me nuts. It's the Austin Powers triple feature. It's cool that they're all together. I just do not like the bind on the side. It just looks so generic. Pineapple Express. Classic comedy, again, coming out in those Seth Rogen, Judd Apatow era. This stars him and James Franco. This movie is hysterical. One of my wife's favorite movies, actually is my wife's favorite movie, Clueless. I bought this Blu-ray for her, and she'll still watch the HBO stream. And then last but not least, as far as comedies, right? We're going to have Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2 on 4K, both from Paramount, both great transfers. Beverly Hills Cop is my favorite Eddie Murphy movie. I absolutely love that movie. And now I'm going to show you guys my Batman collection, because there is a lot here. We're going to have Batman Mask of the Phantasm, arguably the best Batman movie. Batman and Batman Returns on 4K. This is the Batman 4-film collection. It slides off, and then you got the 4 Batman films in here. That's where I own Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, and I upgraded the other 2 movies. Then I have The Batman, which came out last year, and this 4K is fantastic. If you haven't seen The Batman on 4K, you're missing out. Now, Michael Giacchino's score, it really bothers me still that he wasn't nominated for an Academy Award for it. Now I have the Dark Knight Blu-ray Trilogy, and I have the Dark Knight 4K Blu-ray Trilogy. I'm going to hold on to this because I really do like the packaging of this one, so this is one that I'm not going to put in the doubles pile just because I really like the packaging. I actually like the packaging more than the 4K set, if I'm being completely honest with you guys. Then we have my Iron Man Blu-ray set. I actually really don't like this. I would like to upgrade that one day, but Disney really doesn't put out great 4K, so I haven't felt compelled to. My Superman 5-film 4K collection. I really love this. You know, the 4Ks themselves are really hit or miss. You can watch a review for every single disc on this on the channel, but you know, some are better than others in my opinion. And then going down the MCU line, you'll have my last MCU 4K that I bought because they give Dolby Vision and the entire bells and whistles, the IMAX scenes on Disney Plus, not on 4K. The 4K is actually the bare bones version, if you can believe that. So you get movies like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Avengers Age of Ultron, Black Panther, Captain Marvel, and you'll notice all these steelbooks are gorgeous. Avengers Endgame, Avengers Infinity War, Spider-Man Far From Home, the best MCU movie, yeah, I said it, Thor Ragnarok on 4K, Ant-Man, Spider-Man Homecoming on 4K, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 on 4K. That was my first MCU 4K, because if you'll notice, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 is on Blu-ray, Captain America the First Avenger, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War, and The Incredible Hulk. This is my X-Men Blu-ray 3-film collection. And then this is my X-Men 3-film collection on 4K. So I actually don't know why I'm holding on to that Blu-ray collection of that. X-Men First Class on Blu-ray. X-Men Days of Future Past on 4K. X-Men Days of Future Past on Blu-ray, so that's going in the doubles collection. X-Men Apocalypse on Blu-ray Steelbook. Really nice Steelbook as well. Logan on 4K, really nice 4K here, guys. I mean, one of the best. X-Men Origins Wolverine, one of the worst. And The Wolverine, which is pretty good. And then to finish out my superhero collection, you're going to have movies like Deadpool on 4K, Deadpool on Blu-ray, which will end up in the doubles pile, guys. Deadpool 2 on 4K, The Suicide Squad, the best DCEU film, or DCU, whatever the hell they're going by. Shazam, really good 4K, also a really good film. Aquaman, I like this movie more than most people. Man of Steel, now this is still probably one of the best DCEU movies. They really knocked it out of the park right in the beginning. I don't know if you guys can see that lenticular lens cover that they went with the Steelbook. Suicide Squad, you know, this movie's bad. Blade, love this 4K, love this movie. 1998, you know, this is a movie that doesn't get the appreciation it deserves in the world of superhero films. I feel like people just go either right to Iron Man or The Dark Knight or even the X-Men movies. They forget that Blade came out. Hellboy and Hellboy, The Golden Army are both also great 4Ks. You have to check these out. Alright, next up is animation. So we get Kubo and the Two Strings and Coraline, which are Leica 4K Blu-rays, and these steelbooks are beautiful. And now diving into Pixar, which is my favorite studio as far as animation goes. You get Toy Story, Toy Story 2, and Toy Story 3 on 4K. You'll notice I don't have Toy Story 4. That's a mistake by me. A Bug's Life on Blu-ray, Finding Nemo on Blu-ray, Finding Dory on Blu-ray, Rat-a-Tat-Tooey on Blu-ray, Coco, one of my favorite. Actually, it is my favorite Pixar film on 4K. Amazing 4K. I have the Wall-E Blu-ray here. Really no reason for that. We'll put that in the doubles pile. The Incredibles 1 and 2 on 4K. Inside Out on Blu-ray. Beauty and the Beast on Blu-ray. Wreck-It Ralph on 4K Steelbook. The Lion King on Blu-ray. And these are the animes that I have. I have Grave of the Fireflies on Blu-ray, Spirited Away on Blu-ray, Ghost in the Shell on 4K. I used to have the Blu-ray. This is probably my favorite anime film, actually. Akira on Blu-ray. I don't have the 4K yet, but this is another one that I really love. I have the SpongeBob SquarePants movie on Blu-ray because it's awesome. It is Steven Hillenburg's last outing. That was actually supposed to be at the end of SpongeBob. It was actually supposed to end with that movie. The Nightmare Before Christmas on Blu-ray. One of my favorite, I put this in animation, but it can go superhero movies, but one of my favorite films just overall, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And then the Lego Movie on Blu-ray. And now we'll dive a little bit into action films. So we get Snatch on 4K, Kingsman: The Secret Service on 4K Blu-ray, one of Matthew Vaughn's best films. Air Force One, not a huge fan of this movie, but I do have it on Blu-ray. New Jack City, love this movie. That one needs a 4K, just like Con Air needs a 4K. The Lethal Weapon 4-film collection. I do not like the packaging or the discs in this movie. I would really love an upgraded 4K. I do love the exterior box art, though. I wouldn't mind if they reused that. The Rock, this one needs a 4K upgrade as well. I don't know what they're doing with Michael Bay movies on 4K, but for some reason, The Rock hasn't gotten an upgrade. And this is my Fast Films collection, so I have the Fast and Furious 8-film 4K collection, then I have F9 on 4K. I used to have the 6-film Blu-ray collection, Blu-ray set here, which only went up to Fast and Furious 6, and I was alright with being done with the franchise after the Runway in 6, but I'm glad I went back, but this is going to go in the doubles collection. Crank, I just reviewed this Lionsgate 4K Steelbook here on the channel a couple months ago if you want to get my full thoughts on this. Great Steelbook though. Cobra, absolutely love this movie. I can't believe it took me that long to see it, but Cobra is a fantastic film. Wrath of Man, this is a very underrated 4K Blu-ray because no one really talks about it. The movie Wrath of Man 2 was another one that just kind of came and went. It's a really good Guy Ritchie film. You should definitely check it out. Face Off, there's been rumors about a Kino Lorber 4K for a while. Don't know why we haven't gotten it yet. Brooklyn's Finest, F. Gary Gray's, or is this Antoine Fuqua? Either way, really underrated film. Law-Abiding Citizen on 4K. You know, my review for this still gets comments on it, and usually people point out to me that I'm wrong about this movie, so that's always fun. Speed on 4K. Love this movie. One of the best movies of 1994. One of the best movies of the 90s. Keanu Reeves became an action star thanks to this. Dennis Hopper's chewing up the scenery in that one. Absolutely love it. John Wick 3, which goes along with John Wick 1 and 2 on 4K. Don't have John Wick 4 on 4K yet. This is my Bourne Film Collection 4K set. This has all of them in here. There was a Steelbook set that came out last year, and I think a brand new collection as well, but I have this previous edition. The Bourne films are not my favorite, but I do enjoy them. Mad Max, I only have Mad Max Fury Road on Blu-ray and the Road Warrior on Blu-ray. And it's funny because I'm not a big Mad Max guy. The one I like the most is the first Mad Max. I don't even own that on Blu-ray. Bad Boys 1 and 2 on Blu-ray. And then Bad Boys for Life on 4K. Bad Boys 1 and 2 does have regular 4Ks. I just don't own them yet. And these are my Mission Impossible 4Ks. You guys have seen me talk about these here on the channel before. So they all have individual reviews if you want to check those out. And this is actually going to be my Steven Spielberg collection. So we get Jaws 1 and 2, both on 4K from Universal. Bridge of Spies on Blu-ray. War of the Worlds on 4K. Catch Me If You Can on Blu-ray. Great movie. Came out the same year as Minority Report. Saving Private Ryan on 4K. I put this just because I wanted to keep all the Jurassic Parks together. So I have Jurassic Park, the collection over here, which goes all the way up to Jurassic World, and then this is Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. I don't own yet Jurassic World, what is it, Dominion on 4K, because I don't want to see it again, but I guess I'll have to eventually end up with that. Jurassic Park, I have the 3D Blu-ray here. Really no reason to have that anymore because I don't have a 3D TV, so I'll leave that in the doubles pile. Schindler's List. This movie's a rough watch, but it's one of the best made films ever. One you have to see at least once in your lifetime. Ralph Fiennes is haunting in this movie. E.T., my favorite Spielberg movie. This 4K is great. It's John Williams' best score. I grew up with this movie, just absolutely adore it. And then probably his second best film, and this 4K is great as well, Close Encounters with the Third Kind. Love this movie. And then you guys are going to see my Indiana Jones 4-film 4K Steelbook collection, which I don't love because of this exterior box. This just drives me nuts. But the Steelbooks inside are very nice, and there's also reviews for each one of these here on the channel, and Dial of Destiny if you want to check that out. Alright, now it's time to get into sci-fi and fantasy, and where do you begin with that? I'd say Star Wars, so I have my Star Wars Blu-ray collection here, 1 through 3. And then this is Star Wars Episode 4, 5, and 6 on Blu-ray. And some of these have been upgraded to 4K, like Rogue One, I have the Blu-ray and the 4K. The Blu-ray is just going to go in the double pile. This is Star Wars A New Hope on 4K. That's the only 4K that was actually done by 20th Century Fox. The rest are done by Disney, so The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi on 4K. And then here I have The Force Awakens. I have the Steelbook Blu-ray. Then I have The Force Awakens on 4K. And I have The Last Jedi on 4K Blu-ray Steelbook. I know that a lot of people don't love that one. My Ghostbusters, I actually don't have 4K. I have this book thing that they were doing for Ghostbusters 1 and 2. Really need to upgrade that. These Blu-rays are rough, and I heard that the 4Ks are actually pretty dang good. The Back to the Future Ultimate Trilogy on 4K right here. Pirates of the Caribbean, I have the Blu-ray set. Actually, this is an import. I heard the 4K for this is horrible. I have the Harry Potter films on Blu-ray as well. I don't have the 4K. I know that those 4Ks are pretty good, though. And then I have The Shape of Water on 4K just sitting here. I have Planet of the Apes on Blu-ray. Then I got Rise of the Planet of the Apes. This is actually my favorite Planet of the Apes film, is Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes on 4K. And then War for Planet of the Apes on 4K. Really creating that great trilogy. One that we don't talk about anymore, but was really good. Annihilation on 4K. Love that movie. The Martian I have on Blu-ray, but there is a 4K out there. Edge of Tomorrow, which I just love this movie. Edge of Tomorrow, Live, Die, Repeat, whatever you want to call it. I just call it a great movie. That's an awesome 4K. This is a very bad movie by M. Night Shyamalan, but my wife loves it. The Last Airbender. Arrow Video 12 Monkeys 4K I have right here. And then I have the previous Blu-ray, which is going to go into my doubles pile. The Matrix on 4K. And then this is the 3-pack of the Matrix, Matrix Reloaded, Matrix Revolutions. I don't like the rest of them really, but, you know, I wanted to have the whole trilogy in case I wanted to watch it. And I don't really feel the need to upgrade to 4K. And a movie that does have a great 4K, I just don't have it because this Blu-ray for Independence Day is fantastic. If the Blu-ray wasn't so good, I'd probably upgrade. And Star Trek, I have these beautiful 4K set. I've only watched out of this set so far the motion picture. I have to go in and do them all. That's why I bought this, but I haven't done it yet. Maybe I'll do a review for the channel for the entire set. If you guys want that, let me know in the comment section below. Day After Tomorrow Blu-ray. This is one of those Roland Emmerich movies I actually like. I think it's really good. And then some of my favorite movies of all time. My favorite movie of all time, actually, The Terminator. I have this Blu-ray again with these really nice slip covers on there. That was like $5. T2, I have 2 different versions of the worst 4K out there. So I have the standard slipcover version, and then I have the really nice Lionsgate Steelbook version, where, you know, you slide it in and out. Absolutely love that. Just hate the scan. I have 4Ks for Terminator Genesis and Terminator Dark Fate. Don't like Genesis, but I do have the Steelbook of it. And then I have Total Recall here on 4K. And then my Salvation is going to be in this Terminator box set. This is actually my first Blu-ray, along with, what's it called? Along with Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. So I won't get rid of this unless, like, the big 4K definitive edition comes out. Otherwise, it's kind of like the extended version, like it's that, you know, it's got this steel Terminator on it. Kind of, if you guys remember the Extreme DVD that came out back in the day, this feels like an extension of that. So I really do appreciate that. And then you got my RoboCop. So this Steelbook is just the Blu-ray, and then this is the 4K Arrow release. They're both Arrow releases, but this 4K is one of my favorite pieces in the entire collection. I love Love this RoboCop release. It's one of my favorites in my entire collection. It's just absolutely beautiful, mainly because I'm just a huge RoboCop fan. And really, Sci-Fi has gotten some of the best releases because Donnie Darko also has an incredible 4K release that I absolutely adore. District 9. Love this movie. Love this 4K. Men in Black. I'm not a huge fan of the Steelbook, but the 4K transfer is really good. Just make sure if you're going to be watching it with Dolby Vision or HDR, the Dolby Vision does fix some of the issues that the HDR might have. V for Vendetta. Another great 4K. Remember, the 5th of November. Looper, surprisingly great 4K, very underrated movie. If you don't like Rian Johnson, at least try Looper, you might like that one. Super Troopers, great movie here. Another movie from Paul Verhoeven, very similar to RoboCop. I would say this is his third best movie behind RoboCop and Total Recall. Unbreakable, great 4K, great movie. You know, M. Night Shyamalan really started off his career 2 for 2, 3 for 3 for me, because I really do enjoy science. Super 8, this is one of the 4Ks where you can see the difference between the HDR and the Dolby Vision. I think, if I remember correctly, that the HDR was actually better on this. And then you get your Lord of the Rings 4K trilogy. Love this trilogy of movies. The 4Ks are some of the best. They are showpieces. They're some of the ones, these are reference quality 4Ks as far as visuals go. The Running Man. Now this is also a great 4K steelbook. You get the best of both worlds, where you get a slipcover, standard slipcover over a steelbook. You don't get that much. Actually, this is the only time I've ever seen anything like this, where you get a standard slipcover over it. You never see that. Really did appreciate that. Oblivion on Blu-ray. There is a 4K out there for this, but I don't own it. Dune, great 4K, great film. Looking forward to Dune 2. There's rumors that Dune 2 though is going to get delayed, which I'm getting really nervous about. Gattaca on 4K. This is a fantastic movie. If you haven't seen that, great sci-fi film. Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman. I guess that's where they met before they got married. Dark City, very underrated 90s sci-fi film, very similar to The Matrix. You can see the inspiration on The Matrix in that movie. The Burbs. This is a great movie starring Tom Hanks. Just a great movie. Carrie Fisher's in this movie as well. Another great 4K, Highlander. Absolutely love this movie. Great 80s film. It's not the perfect movie from the 80s. You know, I feel like it gets a lot more hyped up than as good as it really actually is. But one thing we can all agree is that the villain played by Clancy Brown is one of the best 80s villains. That's one of his best performances, even better than his performance as Mr. Krabs. This was from Lord Radiant. I bought it, but he recommended to me to buy this film and check it out. There's a review on the channel for this. Guardians, basically just a ripoff of the Avengers movies, but check that out, it's fun. Mars Attacks. I just always love this movie. It's very underrated in Tim Burton's filmography. It's just a fun movie with a stacked cast from the 1990s. Love that movie. Very underrated. Arrival. Denis Villeneuve's best film in my opinion. And this guy made Blade Runner 2049 and Dune. But this is his best. A very thought-provoking, but yet the scope of this movie. This is, I think, a real... If aliens came to Earth, this is, I think, the most accurate situation of what it would be like. I think they nailed it with this movie. I love that movie. Source Code, starring Jake Gyllenhaal. This was Duncan Jones' debut directorial film, I believe. It was either this or Moon. I can't remember which one, but I love this movie. Predator on 4K. Somehow this ended up in the sci-fi pile and not in the horror pile with the others, so that's a little bit strange. But anyway, Predator is an 80s classic. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jesse the Body Ventura. I mean, Carl Weathers. Those fucking arms. The Core. This is a great 4K as well, but it really exposes how bad the CGI is in this movie. This is a very entertaining movie. It's a stupid movie, but it's a very entertaining movie. Speaking of stupid but very entertaining movies, In Time. This is a very underrated sci-fi movie starring Justin Timberlake. Really, the concept of this movie is more interesting than the actual movie, but I still enjoy it. Frequency, one of the most underrated movies of all time. I'll talk about this movie whenever. If anyone ever wants to listen to me talk about Frequency, this is literally my #1 most underrated movie ever. Deserves a lot more love. And then here we got Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 on 4K. Both are just fantastic films that you have to see. I recommend them both on 4K and watch them back to back, even though they have different directors, because the original is directed by Ridley Scott in his best film. Here's the Blu-ray version of Blade Runner, which we'll go into the doubles pile. And then here's my recent review. I did Waterworld on 4K. I don't really love this movie, but I really did enjoy my last rewatch. I love the Arrow packaging, but, you know, I have to be honest with myself. Am I going to go back and revisit this? I'm not too sure, so this might be a giveaway on the channel soon. We don't know. I have upgrade on 4K and Blu-ray. No need now for the Blu-ray, so the 4K is all that we will be holding on to, while the Blu-ray will go into the doubles pile. Then you got Moon. Speaking of Duncan Jones, I love this movie. There is a 4K out there that I didn't grab. The Italian Job remake. This should have ended up in action, but it didn't. And then Willy Wonka. This is another one that should have ended up in... Probably, where would you put this? Would it be under sci-fi adventure? I guess it's right in the right spot. Alright, now we're going to do my top shelf, which you guys can't see right now behind me. And that's basically all my favorite directors and all their movies, my Kino Lorber 4Ks and their Blu-rays, all of my James Bond collections, and some other directors all basically fit my top shelf because I don't put them in any certain category, just because I like to keep them all together. I mean, some have fallen under the Criterion collection, like Martin Scorsese movies, so we'll dive into him first. So we get Rupert Pumpkin in The King of Comedy. Love that movie. The Color of Money, awful Blu-ray. Disney has the rights to the 4K. That's why we haven't gotten that yet. Goodfellas also has a 4K, but apparently it's really bad, so I have the Blu-ray. Cape Fear, great Blu-ray. Needs a 4K upgrade, also a great movie. Casino, really good 4K, definitely an upgrade over the previous Blu-ray. Gangs of New York, I don't really love this movie. I feel like Cameron Diaz and Leonardo DiCaprio aren't bringing their all in this movie, but Daniel Day-Lewis is enough to save it. He gives a world-class performance. The Aviator, Leonardo DiCaprio, he's good in this movie, but he's not great. I always felt like he looked too young. The Departed, this one needs a 4K. It's Martin Scorsese's Best Picture winner, his only Best Picture winner, which is absolutely crazy. Probably should have beat Dances with Wolves in 1990 with Goodfellas, but he didn't. Shutter Island, this is a very underrated one in his filmography. Has a 4K as well that I don't have. The Wolf of Wall Street, this has an Arrow 4K, and then here in America we have a Warner Brothers 4K, which is pretty good. Actually, I'm sorry, not Warner Brothers, Paramount, which is a really good 4K. And then Hugo, my most recent review. Hugo is a great 4K, great movie, just shows how much Martin Scorsese loves cinema. It's all on display in this movie, and this is a really good 4K if you haven't seen that. Now we'll dive into my favorite director of all time, Quentin Tarantino. We get Reservoir Dogs on 4K, Pulp Fiction on 4K, Jackie Brown, rumors of a 4K coming. This is his most underrated film in my opinion. Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2 on Blu-ray. Really have kind of gone a little bit colder on these in comparison to his other films. Death Wish. Now you can watch the whole thing. You can watch the entire Grindhouse collection that him and Robert Rodriguez did back in 2007 with Planet Terror, all the commercials, and then go into Death Proof. Or you could just do what I do and have the full cut of Death Proof on Blu-ray. That's what I wanted because I'm not a big fan of Planet Terror. Inglourious Bastards. This one, it's hit or miss for me. Christoph Waltz is amazing, but I would have liked more time with the Bastards. But it's still a good movie. It's Quentin Tarantino. I love all of his movies at equal degrees. Django Unchained, Christoph Waltz, again, he won back-to-back Academy Award, well, not in back-to-back years, but back-to-back Quentin Tarantino films between this and then, of course, with Inglourious Bastards. But he plays the hero in this one in comparison to the villain. So it just shows you the range of Christoph Waltz between the two movies. The Hateful Eight, I got a really nice slipcover on here. This one is, I'm hoping for a 4K down the line because I love this movie. It's basically Clue in the Snow in the Old West, but Samuel L. Jackson and Walter Goggins give world-class performances in that. And then his last film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I have this really nice steelbook that I absolutely love. And the movie itself, I might be higher on this movie than others. I know a lot of people say, oh, you can cut Margot Robbie out of it. I say absolutely not. It's a fantastic film. And then we get Michael Mann's movies. So you have Manhunter, which I love. That's the first time we ever see Hannibal Lecter on screen. Basically, the film Red Dragon is that same movie, but Manhunter is definitely way better than that. And Michael Mann directed it. If you like Miami Vice, very similar tone. Heat on Blu-ray. Heat on 4K. One of the worst 4Ks around, but I'm going to give it another shot. That's why it's not in the doubles pile yet. Collateral on 4K. Not the biggest upgrade from Blu-ray to 4K, but I blame the cameras for that. Michael Mann was using these digital cameras. It works better in the movie Miami Vice than it does with Collateral. And now we'll dive into one of my personal favorite directors, Tony Scott, and we'll start it off with this bad boy right here, the Arrow. I have the 4K collection. There is also just a regular 4K, but not with the steelbook, but it's also different box art, but it's still a hard Arrow box, but I like this version. This is the one I went for. I did have the previous Blu-ray. It's in the doubles pile. Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick. This is not a Tony Scott film. Did I say Tony Scott for the other movie? I might have. Either way, Quentin Tarantino and Tony Scott, they came together and made magic happen with True Romance, but this is a Tony Scott film. This is a Joseph Kosinski movie, because unfortunately Tony Scott passed away before the making of this movie. Same thing with Jerry Bruckheimer, who was one of the producers on it, so that's always really sad, but it's still kind of a Tony Scott movie because he directed the original one. And Top Gun Maverick is the best 4K out there. It's definitely the benchmark of all 4Ks. You get Man on Fire on Blu-ray here with this really nice Best Buy slipcover. And Days of Thunder on 4K, which I've said before is the most underrated 4K around. And now diving into one of my personal favorite directors, we're going to go down the line with Kevin Smith, who really grew on me. So I have the Arrow Video Mallrats 4K Blu-ray, really nice. There's a review for that here on the channel. I have this 3-pack. I don't like the 3-pack because these films aren't in order, but you get Chasing Amy, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and the original Clerks, which is a classic. Tusk, I might be one of 4 people on the entire planet who love Tusk. I think that's a great movie. Jay and Silent Bob, the reboot. This is a fantastic film. And then I have Clerks 3 on 4K. I love this Lionsgate 4K. Now, you guys know that getting Kevin Smith movies on Blu-ray or even right now is really tough. Dogma is my favorite one of his movies, and I don't even have that on 4K. It drives me nuts. Let's move on to another director, and another director we have in here is Francis Ford Coppola, and he directed the Godfather films, and I have the Godfather 4K trilogy. This was the first giveaway we did here on the channel. You get Apocalypse Now on 4K. This is one of the best sets out there. You get all 3 cuts of the film. You get them all on 4K. You also get them all on Blu-ray. And you also get Heart of Darkness, which is one of the best making-of documentaries ever, bar none. You get all that, and this is usually on sale for like 25, 30 bucks, which is incredible to me because it is really one of the best sets out there. Then you move on to the Coen brothers with their first film, Blood Simple. There is a Criterion Blu-ray release of this. Fargo, which is my favorite of all of his films. The Big Lebowski on 4K. I have a Blu-ray in the doubles pile. No Country for Old Men. This Blu-ray is great, and also it really does need an upgrade, and it should have won Best Picture in 2007, so thank God it did. I know it's really tough because that's the same year as There Will Be Blood, but I think No Country for Men deserved the Best Picture winner that year. Javier Bardem's performance in this movie is absolutely stunning and scary as hell. One of the best movie villains of all time. Now we're going to dive into some Nolan non-Batman movies that I have on Blu-ray and 4K, and my Memento Blu-ray is a Canadian steelbook that I have because this film still hasn't come to 4K. The Prestige on 4K. That's actually an import. Inception on 4K. No slipcover, but no harm, no foul. Great 4K. Interstellar. Well, did I say Interstellar? This one's Inception. This one's Interstellar. Interstellar is a great 4K, has great IMAX scenes in here. This is probably, this and Inception I go back and forth with as which are my favorite Nolan films, and I actually think Oppenheimer might be my new favorite after seeing that, because that movie blew me away. Now, Tenet, I rewatched Tenet, and I have this 4K steelbook. I might have been a little too high on John David Washington's performance in that movie. I don't think it was as good as I had previously remembered. He felt very flat and very generic in it, and I was pretty surprised at that. And now we'll dive into my James Bond collection. So we have Sean Connery Part 1, Sean Connery Part 2, Roger Moore, George Lazenby. He only had one movie. Actually, he was in between Bond movies, so he was on Her Majesty's Secret Service. He only has one film in this collection, so the George Lazenby collection's pretty small. Roger Moore Part 1. Roger Moore Part 2. Timothy Dalton, who is one of the most underrated James Bonds. You got him in The Living Daylights and License to Kill. He is one of the best Bonds out there, and his 2 films both fall in my top 10 films of the James Bond franchise. Then you get Pierce Brosnan's collection here. Pierce Brosnan's weird, though. He's one of the best James Bonds, but other than GoldenEye, his movies aren't that great. That's why I own GoldenEye individually, just because, I don't know. I don't even remember how I got this, to be 100% honest with you. Then I have the Daniel Craig collection in a steelbook. I love this steelbook, but they're only Blu-rays, and they only go up to just before Spectre, which is why I have Spectre on Blu-ray. And then, of course, they eventually announced them on 4K, and that's why I ended up with Skyfall on 4K, and No Time to Die came out after the collections had all been previously released, so I bought No Time to Die on 4K. And now we'll go into my Kino Lorber 4K Blu-ray releases. So we'll have Nobody's Fool, starring Paul Newman. Really good 90s movie. Great Philip Seymour Hoffman performance and Bruce Willis performance in that. The First Death Wish, Charles Bronson in Death Wish. This is the best of the films. The 4K, though, is not as good as the Vinegar Syndrome 4K. High Plains Drifter. I believe this was Clint Eastwood's directorial debut, and he does a fantastic job in this movie. He's just great in these westerns, and this 4K looks great and really makes the red pop. I saw some complaints about it, but I disagree. Touch of Evil, another great black and white 4K, starring Orson Welles and Charlton Heston. This is one of the most famous movies from the 1950s. I love this movie. It's just so great, and the 4K is awesome. The Killing. Now, The Killing is an awesome 4K as well. Stanley Kubrick directed this one. The 4K is probably in the top 5 black and white 4Ks out there, along with another one that's in this stack. This movie, I've heard some complaints about it, but I really do think that this is something that's hugely influential on other movies that are out there. I really enjoyed this on my rewatch last year. Honestly, it's, Stanley Kubrick doesn't really make any bad movies. I just don't really enjoy Spartacus. Misery, great 4K. Rob Reiner directed this. Kathy Bates is fantastic in it. James Caan is fantastic in it. I mean, the 4K, the snow pops off your screen. I just rewatched this pretty recently, actually. It's a great winter horror movie. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Now, this is also a fantastic 4K, and it's also just a fantastic film. If you didn't know that Jim Carrey could act, watch this movie. Truman Show is kind of a perfect blend between comedy and drama, but this is a straightforward, dramatic performance, and it'll get you tearing up by the end. Kate Winslet gives a great performance in there as well. And there it is, Paths of Glory, one of the best anti-war films to ever come out. Kirk Douglas gives a great performance, and it's crazy watching that. Him here is so similar to his son Michael Douglas and the cadence of their voices. It's really hard not to notice that. Out of Sight. This movie is also fantastic. Probably Jennifer Lopez's best performance, even better than Selena. George Clooney is great. Everyone is just so charming in this movie. You can tell that this is a Steven Soderbergh film, the guy who would make Ocean's 11. And if you're a fan of Jackie Brown, Ray Nicolette, played by Michael Keaton, pops up in this movie playing the same exact character, which is really cool. Nice little crossover there. The Usual Suspects. I feel like the ending hurts this movie just because once you know the ending, it kind of hurts the rest of the film once you realize that he's kind of just pulling at straws, trying to tell this story, but it's such a fantastic screenplay. I actually think Christopher McQuarrie wrote the screenplay for this, which is very cool. And then still Martin McDonagh's best film, In Bruges, starring Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. I love this movie. It takes place in Bruges. Great movie. Ralph Fiennes gives one of the funniest performances. This movie is a dark comedy like most Martin McDonagh movies. This is still my favorite of his 4 films, but I enjoy all of his films, to varying degrees. The Italian Job, the original Italian Job, starring Michael Caine. I absolutely love this movie. I saw this for the first time this year. The comedy in this movie is great. It's still very action-packed. Definitely a little bit ahead of its time as well, but you can definitely see the influences on other movies on this one, and then you can also see that this movie influenced other films. So it's definitely a movie you should see, especially if you're a cinephile. Speaking of being a cinephile, The Night of the Hunter. This movie came out on 4K this year, and the 4K is stunning. The movie itself is haunting. It feels like a nightmare. I have a full review for this on the channel. You should check this one out, definitely. Serpico, great 4K as well. Great 1970s film. The pacing of this movie definitely feels like the 1970s, but it's still a very enjoyable film, and it's a very topical tale still today. And Al Pacino gives one of his career best performances, but he was firing on all cylinders in the 1970s. And then this is Making Mr. Right. This is actually just a regular old-fashioned Blu-ray from Kino Lorber, but I really do like this movie. It's a very underrated 1980s movie, and stars John Malkovich in a great performance as well. And then my last Kino Lorber Blu-ray or 4K is Marathon Man, which features a great Dustin Hoffman performance. And I've told you guys, I'm not the biggest Dustin Hoffman guy, and Roy Scheider gives a great performance in here as well. And to round out this video, I'm just going to give you guys my TV, DVDs, Blu-rays, and whatever else I felt like didn't warrant to be in the entire film collection. So it goes into the documentaries, just regular show DVDs, show Blu-rays, and we'll do all that right now. And first up is the Ken Burns country music documentary. Ken Burns makes great documentaries. I just happen to own this one. I love it. It's like 16 hours if you ever were wondering about the history of country music. This one is great. I used to have a ton of wrestling DVDs and Blu-rays, but for some reason the only one that I have left is the Triple H documentary from WWE, because you can just watch them all on Peacock now, or if you're not in the US, the WWE Network. Last Action Hero. This is the same people who made In Search of Darkness documentaries. This was actually their first one. They did a good job with this. And then I have a couple HBO shows on Blu-ray and 4K, Chernobyl and Watchmen. I think these came out the same year, and they were both great miniseries. Definitely check them both out. And then these are my Batman the Animated Series DVDs, not Blu-ray, not 4K or anything like that. There's an entire Blu-ray collection, but I have them all individually wrapped on DVD, which I really do love. So I got them all here. I also have Batman, the original motion picture movie on DVD, which is really cool. And I've told you guys Twin Peaks is one of my favorite shows of all time. I have the entire Blu-ray set right here. This includes the original run of the show and then the reboot of the show that came out a few years ago. So I have them all here, and then I have Fire Walk With Me in the Criterion collection. And then I grabbed that 70s show on Blu-ray. I got this for like 15 bucks. Couldn't skip that deal because I absolutely love this movie. I absolutely love this show, and it wasn't streaming at the time, so I scooped it up just in case it wasn't going to be streaming anymore. Another great show if you're a 90s kid, Boy Meets World. I had to have them all. I think these are DVDs. These are DVDs. I bought them really for my wife, but they ended up in my collection. And then I have the complete series of Reno 911 on DVD. This was like 15 bucks also. Couldn't skip out on that. I love this show. I still will go back and watch random episodes of the show, especially if I'm new boot goofing. Big fan of that. And then I have Viva La Bam, all the seasons of that on DVD. These were given to me by Matt, who also had doubles of them, so I have these all on DVD. I was a big fan of these when I was younger. I don't know if I'll go back and rewatch them, but hey, I have them in the collection. And anyway, guys, that's going to do it here for me on my Blu-ray, on my entire movie collection. My voice has gone pretty hoarse. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If there's anything in here that you want me to review individually, feel free to ask. If it comes down to my doubles collection, those are all going to be actually given away to you guys in future, either if I start a Patreon or just giveaways on the channel. That's all going to go to you guys. And even movies like Waterworld, and then eventually other movies that I might buy here on the channel might be given away as well. So look out for some physical giveaways along with our digital code giveaway every week. So we'll be talking more about that. I want to get your feedback on that if that's something that you guys are interested in. Make sure you do leave that feedback in the comments section below. And then while you're down there, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and then after you're done doing all of that, I want you to go out in those streets and tell your friends about us. We'll be seeing you around.